Hello, everybody. My name is Chamchi Gimbap, and I am the political fish. Sorry for keeping you waiting. Hashtag Swiss time. Thank you for joining us. We are joined by Captain Switzerland. Welcome to the stream.
Nice to be here.
Yeah, it's been a while. Been a while since you've been on my channel, mate. So yeah, good for you to be back. Good for you to be back. What have you been up to today?
I've been out in the sun, and I was out there for probably no more than about half an hour before I found it unbearable, and returned back home to hide in the shade for a little bit.
Yeah, man. It's I've only walked probably a maximum of, I don't know, 200-300 meters in total today in the outside, and it's just been, whenever I get back, I'm just absolutely drowning in sweat, absolutely drowning. We were topping 40 today, so yeah.
Oh man,
yeah, it's not good. With a humidity effect. Oh, God.
I was going to say, we've been sweltering over here when it's just been pushing over the 30s in some bits of the country, but 40.
Yeah. What with the humidity factor as well? It's it's a bit brutal. It's a bit brutal, and you don't realize it when you're out so much, but when you come in with this air conditioning, you're just like, oh, thank God I can breathe. And then all the sweat just pours out of you, and you just get soaked. And you're just like, oh my God. And it's not a good look when you're a teacher, you know. Not a good look at all.
I imagine
the old
not.
Big sweat patches under the arms and down the back and across the front. And you're just like,
oh man.
Really disgusting. But yeah, it's a nightmare. It's a nightmare. But yeah, I just feel sorry for the guys over in Greece at the moment. I mean, that's quite brutal for them. What were their fires?
Oh Christ, yeah, I heard about that. They had massive fires going on, and some people were having to flee into the sea to get away from it.
Yeah, definitely. But I wish they bought a boat, innit? I know I would. I shouldn't make jokes. It wasn't really like making a joke, really, but you know, it's fucking harsh, man. What was it, 70 dead or something?
You'd have to be careful that your boat wasn't made out of equally flammable materials, though, because you'd be in a spot of bother then if it's just a standard wooden boat left out on the dry beach for most of the day, and then that catches the light shortly before you need to use it.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah. Well, with all that tinder flying about, you know, all the ash and everything else that gets chucked up. Let's have a look, see what we've got in the side chat. Cameron Hickman, hello, mate. How are you doing? Jack James, how are you doing? And of course, our resident Tory, Matt Hancock. Thank you for joining us. Ex-Minister for Wi-Fi and Fun, obviously. So the magic number has been reached. We have reached 10 watching. So let's dive in. So as you can tell by the title of the video, it's probing Captain Switzerland on why he left the Labour Party. So I'm going to...
It sounds awfully personal, probing Captain Switzerland.
Well, you know, you should see what I do with my probing stick first. So anyway... What I'm going to do is I'm going to give some history. So you're a member of the Labour Party since, actually, no, I started at the beginning. So in 2012, you became of voting age. Yes. And at the time, your comment was Labour, I quote, Labour was too Blairite for you for what you believed in, so you voted for the Greens. Your politics at the time, where you believed in social and economic justice, you believed in anti-austerity, you were very much against the amount of homeless people that were around, and you're anti-war, or more kind of anti-interventionalist, and you're looking for a party that would proliferate in green energy. So you stuck with the Greens until approximately 2015, when, of course, Corbyn took part in the leadership race, which obviously happened just after the 2015 general election. So you then you joined the Labour Party to vote for Corbyn, of which you voted for twice.
Yep.
And obviously, in 2016, we had the EU referendum. Now, since then, in your words, you were saying that in the meantime, you were giving Corbyn a bit of leeway because you liked him, because he seemed like a genuine kind of guy. Okay.
Yes.
And there was also divisions in the party as well. So you knew that there was a hard Brexit side, but you also knew there was a soft Brexit side, and of course there was a Remain side as well. And you could see these divisions within the party. I'm kind of reading between the lines here, and so you gave him a bit of leeway. Then, of course, about let's say, let me just check my diary.
I was about to say you've done your homework here. This is like a "This Is Your Life" or something like that.
And then, of course, we had the Chequers meeting, which was, I believe, on July 13th. And on the Chequers meeting, you came out and openly opposed the Tories, but still backed Labour. No, it was before then. Sorry, maybe was it the 6th? So you openly opposed the Tories on their Chequers plan, but you still openly backed Labour. Now, I suppose my first question is, with regards to that Chequers meeting, did you feel like a hypocrite at the time?
Did I feel like I did slightly, yeah. It kind of dawned on me after. I'll probably backtrack a little bit myself then. Kind of, given Labour's Brexit policy and given the Conservatives' Brexit policy, it's sort of been known to people for some time I was a hard Brexiteer. You know, I make no bones about that. And obviously, for the longest amount of time, it appeared that the Conservative Party was far more closely aligned with that than the Labour Party.
Yeah.
Obviously, that was a source of personal conflicts for me, because it was like, well, here's this issue, Brexit, which I care a great deal about, and I think it can only be done one way to get it done correctly. But then on the other hand, there's, you know, as you listed off at the beginning of your introduction here, much of my politics in terms of public spending, tackling homelessness, non-interventionism, all the sorts of things that you've listed off there, that is still very much something that the Labour Party represents. So it's like, of all the parties at the time that appeared to be offering the sort of Brexit I wanted, it was basically the Tories and UKIP. And neither of those parties particularly stood for nearly anything else that I was after. The Labour Party was for most of that themselves. But so what I told myself was, well, what will be quite easy then is Tories are in government at the moment. Tories are going to do Brexit. Another election will roll around at some point. Brexit will be done and dusted. I can vote Labour, no conflicts of interest. But then what came along post-Chequers was obviously the Tories' white paper plan at Chequers fell far, far short of what most Brexiteers expected it would be. It ended up as, you know, a very soft, fudgy Brexit, still staying very much in line with the European Union. And I felt, and this is where it kind of clocked me a little bit, that I felt betrayed by Theresa May, even though I had at never point had any particular affection for Theresa May or overt support of Theresa May. It was purely from a Brexit standpoint. That's what I thought I was getting from her. But in that sort of scathing feeling I had for Theresa May shortly after that, it did get me thinking, well, at the same time, the party that I am supporting, if anything, has had sort of an openly soft Brexit policy for a much longer amount of time than the Tories have. So here are all these angered Tory voters, you know, trying to look for May to get deposed or moving over to UKIP or whatever. And I was sharing in that sort of annoyance, but at the same time, I thought, and I'm still overtly supporting a party that's doing exactly the thing that I'm annoyed at the Tories for right now. So that is something that weighed on me for a little while. So when you said, did I feel a little bit hypocritical? I would say I did, yeah. And I don't like feeling hypocritical. I like my positions on things to be as consistent as possible, at least. They can't always be consistent, but broadly. So yes, that's the answer to your question.
In a nutshell, yes, I did.
In a nutshell, yes, yeah.
Okay, so there are obviously two sides to this that I see. Obviously, there's the Tory side and there's the Labour side. Which do you want me to probe you about first? Would you like me to talk to you about my response and how I think you're essentially right about the Tories. I suppose let's go into that first since I started.
Okay, sure.
Okay, now I think it was the 13th that the Checkers that came out, because I did the Sunday stream on the 15th. Okay, because you were on holiday. So I remember talking to James Fielding and Angels at the time, and it seemed to me that the Checkers, or sorry, Theresa May and her cohort had essentially sacrificed democracy on the altar of business, and that scared me a bit, because I felt it was betraying the vote somewhat. Okay, and I assume you'd agree with that to a certain extent.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the problem when comparing it to the Labour position, because I completely agree with you, they are both a big bunch of fudge, right? The Labour plan is, jobs first, then people from the EU within the UK, and they want a strong economy coming out. I mean, both of which, the Checkers plan and the Labour plan, I feel are both, they wouldn't be able to be achieved with the EU anyway during negotiating period. I mean, we've seen how quickly this Checkers plan, this white paper, has actually just gone poof, and just disintegrated in front of them.
Well, that there is a very good point, actually, because even though you can find some differences between the Labour and the Tory policy, and obviously, well, we can talk about Corbyn's manufacturing speech in a bit if you want, because that kind of that's a slight difference from what there was before.
Yes, we will get onto that. Don't you worry. But
all right, jolly good.
We're just going up to. Okay, we're going up to, if I give you a date, July 14th. Now, on July 14th, that's when you publish your original video saying, I am leaving the Labour Party, of which, to you guys in the side chat and anybody else that hasn't seen it, I have put a link to that original video in the information of this video. So this is just running up to July 14th.
Okay. Just in which case, then, running up to July 14th, I'd say that both the because that was obviously post Chequers still, wasn't it?
Yeah, that's
both
right.
Both the Labour Party's plan and the Conservative Party's plans were either A, unworkable in the sense that they conflicted with many of the red lines the EU had already set out, or B, did not appear to fully implement Brexit as it is understood to me, and probably a fair few other Brexiteers as well, sort of a fairly clean break from the EU. I'd say both parties' plans were probably guilty of it by then.
Oh, exactly. And I completely agree. But you've forgotten one key difference.
Well, go on then.
Okay. May and her cohort are in government. Labour are in opposition. Now, as far as I'm concerned, the opposition party can be whatever they want to be, because they're not the ones having to pitch this to the EU. Okay, I mean, they can have sideline chats and they can do anything, but all the time that the Tory party is in power, it will be their plan or lack of plan, as it seems to be the case, that will actually be followed through on. Do you understand that key difference?
Yes.
So, the Labour Party can write out Brexit. What's your Brexit plan? Well, shitting rocking horses and flying pigs for everybody. Okay, and it just doesn't matter. I mean, it's irrelevant. I mean, the only relevance it is because people, yeah, it was a bit annoying they were sitting on the fence for so long, but it just doesn't really matter because they're in opposition, so they could write up whatever the fuck they wanted. Essentially. So that's I think the key difference is.
Well, I would agree with you that that is a key difference between Labour and the Tories. Obviously, the Tories are at present in charge of the Brexit process. They're the ones who are negotiating. They're the ones who are the government. The Labour Party, like you rightly say, are in opposition. It's not incumbent on them to run the negotiations at the moment. They've just got to, if possible, offer up their own version of what they'd be doing instead. So I completely take that point that you make, but I wouldn't say that necessarily factors into my own feelings of it being a rather hypocritical position for me, at least.
Oh, of course. I mean, I must stress you, I'm not here to try to sell you back to the Labour Party. I'm just giving my opinion on what you've said. That's all.
Oh, of course, yeah.
Of course. So then we move on to July 14th, and you publish your video on why I've left the Labour Party. Now, this was 11 days ago, and fuck me, so much has changed. Just a little bit. Obviously, we've had the white paper completely disintegrate into the Tories' laps. They've got nowhere to go. They're planning for a no Brexit, so a no deal Brexit. Dominic Raab has been promoted, then demoted in that time. We've seen God knows how many resignations. Not enough in my eyes. You know, Esther McVeigh should have gone as far as I'm concerned. I know it's completely separate from Brexit, but she should have gone as well.
Shit's hit the fan, basically.
The shit has hit the fan. Now, we did talk yesterday about Labour's speech. And, of course, we've had headlines today about, and yesterday, well, this week, about the Tories stockpiling food, blood, and basic medication should there be a no-deal Brexit, which seems more and more likely. Do you want to talk about the Tories first, or do you want to talk about Labour first?
Let's go with the Tories first, and then we'll come on back to Labour.
Okay. So, what do you? Oh my God! I've just broke my pen. I've got this really annoying habit of clicking pens when I've got them in my hand, and the tops just flew off, and I've completely broken my pen. So now I can't keep my notes. Hang on, I need to find another pen. Bloody teacher doesn't have a pen handy. That's good, isn't it? Does this one work? Oh yeah, we're back in business. All right, cool. So yeah, we've had the Tories come on and say, you know, we're going to start stockpiling spam, corned beef, and tinned peaches or whatever it is, and blood. Oh, Fray Bentos pies as well, apparently. Weird. I do love those pies though.
Yeah.
Who would have thought a pie in a tin would actually taste so good? But anyway, that's beside the point. And obviously, you know, basic medical supplies such as, you know, aspirin, paracetamol, ibuprofen, blood, and all sorts of basic medical supplies. But they say, oh, there's nothing to worry about. What do you think about that?
Well, I mean, first of all, as far as them saying, well, there's nothing to worry about, of course they'd say that, you know. The opposite of them to go and fucking panic, guys, you know. Well, no, not even fucking panic, but imagine if they were to release statements saying, oh, we would strongly encourage everybody to stock up on petrol and maybe buy a few extra tins of soup to keep in the cupboard and that sort of thing. Like, they couldn't do that. It wouldn't instill any confidence at all. I think there was a petrol shortage a few years back, and there was a minister in the government who'd said some throwaway line about maybe fill up an extra jerry can or two. And then for the few following days, we had literally queues at the different petrol stations. They were all running short because he'd spooked the country into going, oh no, there's not going to be any petrol left. As far as the Tories, you know, taking these steps in preparation, saying, oh, we're going to be stockpiling this, that, and the other, obviously to hear it does not sound good, does it? It doesn't exactly instill confidence. I would say, though, that given that there are risks posed by a no-deal Brexit, the possibility of things getting more complicated with importing things into the country, at least in the short term, I'd say the fact that this is actually being done, you know, Philip Hammond said, oh, I'm putting aside 3 billion or whatever for a no Brexit scenario. They've started ramping up their preparations for it, at least. I'd say that I would be concerned if they weren't doing it. If you get,
sure,
you know, if they were making no preparations for a no Brexit, I'd probably be filled with even less confidence.
But there's one thing, you know, making preparations, and then there's another thing like openly coming out and saying we're essentially filling a doomsday bunker. You know, there are different scales of preparation here. You know, I mean, I'm an earthquake prepper because we get earthquakes here, and it's quite new to this country. Another aspect of global warming, I think, but it's quite new. So I always make sure, you know, I have at least 3 days worth of water. I have at least a week's worth of food always in my flat at any one time.
Oh, man.
So
I'd be dead within 48 hours if it came to some sort of a disaster scenario.
You don't get earthquakes in Stoke-on-Trent, though, do you? So, well, you don't. Have you ever had an earthquake in Stoke-on-Trent?
Not to my knowledge, unless I slept through one.
Fair enough. It's quite possible. I've slept through a few as well, but yeah, there are different ways of preparing. You know, filling in a bunker is one way, or the other way, obviously, is looking at the Labour plan. But before we do get on to the Jeremy Corbyn speech, let's talk a little bit more about Brexit and your own personal relationship with Brexit. Now, it's something I've always wondered. Is I'm not talking about what's happened before, but knowing now what you know now, would you still have voted for Brexit? Which is the first part. Okay, and secondly, what is your if you were Theresa May, or if you were leading the government now, you're a prime minister, what would your negotiating position be?
Oh, wow. Okay. Some interesting questions. Well, the first one, would I still vote Brexit? Yes.
Okay.
Fairly simple answer to that one.
Sure.
The second one, if I were Theresa May, are we assuming in this scenario that I'm not actually tied down with the thin parliamentary majority of Theresa May, that I'm kind of just in a god mode, prime minister mode, where I kind of get to...
No. Okay. Let me clarify a little bit. Okay. You're a leader of the government. Okay, so you are prime minister, but I would have to interject that you do have the very slim majority that Theresa May has. So assume Captain Twits' party is leading. Because it adds a little bit more nuance to today's situation.
I think. Realism, yeah.
Yes, yeah.
So this isn't sort of like my ideological preferred Brexit. It's what do I think Theresa May could try and go for in her present situation?
Well, yeah, I suppose, but you have to imagine that it's Captain Swiss's party, but you don't have a large majority.
Okay. I mean, this is difficult then, trying to put myself in the mindset of a leader of the country of a slim majority and what I'd go for. Obviously, as you'd probably know, my inclinations are to say, well, leave the single market and the customs union. Right. Indeed, also the jurisdiction of the European Court as soon as possible, which were to begin with Theresa May's positions, or at least apparently they're still her positions. So are we assuming then that I've got the same potential rebellers on my own backbenches then with the various things that I'm going to be proposing?
Potentially. So it's where do you go? I mean, if you read the Chequers plan, when they say, oh, we will leave the customs union, but we'll have a customs arrangement, it's just like, yeah, right.
Yeah.
It's all a bit, it's more playing with language than actually playing with policy or a negotiating position, you know. Well, that was my takeaway from it anyway. So, I wonder, what would you do with regards to imports, exports, and obviously the fallback in importing of food and the fallback in trade deals or whatever. What would you do how would you negotiate with Barnier?
Well, I'd basically say to Barnier that we're still looking to continue to trade with the European Union once we've left. You know, the idea that to seek to leave the EU, but then suddenly we would no longer continue to be able to, you know, export into it or import out of it is quite ridiculous. Obviously, it would be different circumstances. We'd no longer be a part of the customs union, nor the single market for that matter. So we wouldn't be able to enjoy, I doubt we'd be able to enjoy the same tariff-free access to the EU at the very least, because we'd be outside of that grouping at that point. So any sort of external tariffs that they place onto other countries, we'd likely have to deal with ourselves. Now, obviously, one option there would be that since we'll be in charge of our own policy, we would be able to put tariffs up to reciprocate if we really wanted to.
Sure.
And we could try and do that to support some sort of a counterbalance to what we'd be facing externally. Now, I know that the European Union have said for the longest amount of time, we're not going to give you your cake and eat it. You can't leave but continue to have all the same benefits of being in the European Union. And that, I'd say, is probably fair enough. I think from a negotiating point of view, it's probably still a wise move to try and start off from that position, though, because if at the very least you think, well, maybe I'll be able to whittle the EU down at some point. So I'd probably start my negotiating position with a sort of have your cake and eat it, a clean Brexit, but ask for all the benefits of the EU, which they're never going to give us anyway. And then from that point, I'd go, okay, then. So now they've clearly got their red lines that we're not matching up against. I'll concede to them eventually. Oh, okay, then we're not going to get all these benefits of being members anymore, unless maybe we pay into the pot or something like that. And my issue with Theresa May's negotiating strategy is it seems that she started off from a sort of middle ground already. She didn't start off with sort of a bold, clean Brexit vision. She almost did. She wasn't too far away from it with the rhetoric, at least. But the signs were there fairly early that she was going to, you know, gradually sort of slide towards this alignment, closer integration, things along those lines. What was the question again?
No, it's all right. It doesn't matter. It's
all right.
I'm just you went from talking about what you would do, I suppose what you would do in Theresa May's situations, but it's fine. You ended up talking about Theresa May at the end, but it's okay because you just led me on to my next question quite nicely.
Jolly good.
What's your view on the divorce bill? Because I know before Dominic Raab basically said, you know, if there is a no deal Brexit, then we're not going to pay the divorce bill. Then if we don't, if there is no deal and no divorce bill paid, then basically all EU citizens within the UK would be at risk, which was quite an interesting thing.
Well, as far as I'm aware, that obviously as members of the EU, all member states had their various obligations to the EU. If they were part of certain programs within the EU, if they were, you know, paying into the pot, and obviously it's divvied out amongst various different programs in different countries. If we had, I think the budget, I can't remember exactly how many years the budget is agreed on sort of as a basis, but I know that there are certain obligations you have stretching off into the future. As far as that's concerned, I think fair dues. You know, if we, when we were members, said, yes, we're going to pay X amount into the pot until so-and-so a year, then I think upon leaving, it's probably fair enough to say, well, you know, look, there's going to be a hole in the budget otherwise. It's fair enough to keep our commitments. But you'd hope then, in which case, that the fact that we would be agreeing to do that would probably be a bit of a goodwill gesture on our part. They think, oh yeah, that again, maybe this is a difference in
negotiating strategies.
But what was the second part of your question? What Dominic Raab had said regarding?
I mean, what are your thoughts on the amount that they're asking for, I suppose, and what Dominic Raab did? I think this is one of the things that got him demoted to basically Brexit secretary, taking notes in the side
with the typewriter as you come into the office. It's literally the secretary of Brexit,
literally the Miss Moneypenny of Brexit. So,
I mean, I think that the kind of the feeling was that the amount we were going to be paying as this divorce bill, yes, it felt rather hefty, and I think there was more on top of it than just what our bare bones obligations were supposed to be. But I think the idea was at the time, okay, well, we're going to have to pay them a fairly large sum, but further down the line, we're going to get a trade deal with them. Hopefully, maybe a little bit of a bespoke trade deal. I mean, the aspirations of that have kind of gone by the wayside.
Yeah.
Now, you said that Rob had said that if we were to leave with no deal, then we wouldn't be paying them this settlement.
That's right. That's right.
I mean, I kind of somewhat see that as a consequence of negotiations breaking down. In a way, it's kind of like, well, you know, the EU said, this is an important thing to remember, that as far as the negotiating process went, the EU were the ones that set the timetable out. And they've done this strategy before where they say, right, you decide on the money you're giving us first, then we'll talk to you about what kind of trade we're willing to do. And they made it very clear to the UK that that was the order they were going to do things in. So we attached a price tag to leaving before we actually found out from them what our circumstances of having left were going to be. Now, if trade talks, not trade talks, if the talks altogether around the circumstances of us leaving do break down, it appears, well, we're not going to be able to agree anything with the EU at this point, then giving them that lump sum of money then, I think, well, if it was a goodwill gesture to begin with, again, if we're looking at what possible cards the UK has in its hand at this point to go, you know, the EU is a big organization. There's not an awful lot of leverage we've got over them in these negotiations, but one of them, at least, I would consider to be the divorce bill. The fact that we're going to be offering to give them this money over a period of time.
But like you said, if it's previous. If it's previous money that we're supposed to have paid anyway, like I don't know, I suppose you could put it in parallel with something like if you sign a 12-month tenancy agreement and you want to move out after 6 months, you're still liable for 6 months worth of tenancy. Do you understand that?
Yes, I understand that.
So it'll be similar to that kind of situation is the way I imagine it.
Well, I mean, perhaps I'd say then, upon leaving, maybe pay them the absolute bare bones of what it is that we had to put into the EU budget. No sort of extra frills around the side. But generally, I'd say that if we're going to be if we were to leave with no deal, and if it were to be on WTO rules, and we were to give that lump sum to the EU anyway after we've left, but kind of nothing from them afterwards, I agree with what you're saying about what we would owe to them. But as far as the interests of this country and the financial interests of this country, I don't think it would be an awfully wise decision. But can I pick up on the other point you said about EU citizens here in the UK?
That's right,
because I think that's an important one. And I think some Brexiteers have sort of been unequivocal about this. And I think it's an important thing to say that any EU citizens who were here prior to the Brexit vote, perhaps even prior to us leaving, if you want to say that, maybe 2019 or something, ought to have complete, full and free rights to be able to stay here in the United Kingdom if they want. I would say that much. I think it's fair enough at the same time as well. I think that, you know, if they came to live here, obviously not knowing that the UK would eventually be leaving the European Union, came here to make a life here, or if they've got family here, jobs here, etc., then I don't think it's right for their livelihood to be put into jeopardy as a result of us leaving. So any measures by the government, regardless of whether it's a deal or a no-deal Brexit, I'd still want to see residency rights for existing EU citizens resident here kept intact, essentially. I'd say that there does need to be an obvious cut-off point. There does need to be a point in time where we say, sorry, other EU citizens in the EU, but, you know, we've left. There needs to be a point once we've left where we say, and now we need to treat you in the same way we treat anyone from any other country in terms of our immigration policy. But as far as people who are already here, everything should be done to make sure that they can be allowed to remain with no barriers to that.
That's an interesting one. Obviously, what with Dominic Raab saying what he said. Now, the first thing you got to say is obviously the door swings both ways. And how many was it? 1.2, 1.3 million British citizens live in the EU.
Yes, the expats.
Yep. Could call them immigrants if you want. Like
you could do, yeah.
I would say immigrants. Because there's a bit of a double standard there.
Sure.
Okay.
Is fine.
Okay. The reason why I say that, because I hear this argument a lot when I'm in Korea, right? Generally, immigrants are only immigrants is only used for people that are not white, whereas expats is used for people that are white. Now, I completely disagree with that definition.
Could I make one? But I would say that in referring to expats, it's probably a bit more normal if you're referring to expats of your own country. Like, if I were to refer to, say, someone who'd moved from America to Germany, I would probably be far more likely to call them an immigrant than an expat. But given that it's out the country that I'm in at present that I'm speaking about, then probably expat seems a more relevant term.
Well, sure. But whether you like it or not, immigrant has racial connotations attached to it, right? Now, so let me get this straight on the video. When I use the word expat or immigrant, this is what I mean. Now, an expat, in my idea or my understanding of it, is someone who is planning to go back to their home country at some point during their life. Okay, so I would be looking to go back to the UK at some point to live.
Okay.
My time here in Korea at the moment, I'm an expat, but I will go home at some point. Okay, it could be in a year, it could be in 10 years, it could be in 20 years, it could be in 50 years. Who knows? Okay, now that's what I understand as an expat. Whereas with regards to an immigrant, if I came here, I got citizenship and I decided to stay here, I would then become a immigrant. Okay.
You'd be an immigrant, and then if you actually moved there long term, you'd become a citizen. A citizen who immigrated to the country, but a citizen.
That's right. So I in the eyes of Koreans, I would be an immigrant. Okay, so that's just for semantics and all that business. That's just what I mean. So we can move on and use those terms as we mean them. Okay. So obviously there are God knows how many expats and God knows how many immigrants over in the EU, people that plan to stay there or people that are just on extended working terms, so over there for a few years or whatever. And obviously that door swings both ways. Now, another thing I thought was quite interesting was in 2016, after Cameron had resigned and Theresa May took over, and they had the war cabinet to work out their negotiating stance, is almost everybody in that war cabinet said we want to guarantee everybody here, every EU citizen in the UK, and it was almost unanimous. There was one person that voted against it, and can you guess who that was?
Was it Boris Johnson by any chance?
No, it wasn't.
No, go on. Who was it?
Theresa May. Seriously, man, that woman's a fucking bitch, man. She really is. Yeah, because she wanted to use them as a bargaining chip.
Which can I say I completely disagree with. And you
exactly
even
right. Yeah.
you even had people like Farage, of all people, saying no, we shouldn't be using the EU citizens as a bargaining chip. Just very quickly, because we spoke about the divorce arrangement a little bit earlier on, I would be much more comfortable using the divorce settlement as a bargaining chip than EU citizens as a bargaining chip. Because I think that one is a matter of money and spreadsheets, and another is the matter of the actual livelihood of people who have either from our country chose to make Europe their home or vice versa. So I think we absolutely should have been right to have said from the very, very off, guarantee the residency rights for existing EU citizens over here. And then it would be on the EU countries then to say, well, and why don't you reciprocate? You know, we've just done it, so you should do it as well, in pure goodwill.
Well, isn't Farage's wife Romanian?
Oh God, no, not Romanian. That would be a funny irony, wouldn't it? I think she's either French or German. I can't remember which, but one of those two. Right.
But that'll be why. I was Romanian. He said, would you like to live next door to a family of Romanians or something?
I think it was along the lines of how would you feel if a large group of young Romanian men moved into a house next door to you? Something like that.
Something like that. Okay. So have we finished with our Tory bashing? So we've spoken about the divorce bill. We've spoken about EU citizens. Okay, so moving on then. We had the Jeremy Corbyn speech.
Yes.
And the Jeremy Corbyn speech was, as we've both said, it should help us mitigate some of the issues that will come about in the event of Brexit or a no deal or whatever. What we're doing, if the car's driving off a cliff, then we're installing airbags and we're putting a big net, hopefully, or a big crash mat at the bottom of the cliff. Yeah, for us to drive off into.
I mean, that is a way of putting it. I'd say I'd probably put a slightly more positive spin on it than sort of go, oh, it's damage limitation. I'd say that it's actually, you know, trying to outline the positives of Brexit, which is really something that we haven't seen enough of from Corbyn or May. Now, Corbyn, I can understand to some degree because, you know, there's a load of MPs in his own party that string him up the moment he even suggests there could be anything good to come out of Brexit. Theresa May, I would have liked to have seen a lot more of this. You know, she's tried to a little bit here and there, but she hasn't really sounded particularly positive. She just kind of, everything she says is like she's dragging her feet. She just goes, we will deliver on the will of the British people. We will deliver the Brexit that they asked for because that is what they democratically wanted. But you know, there wasn't really an awful lot about, and this is why we're leaving and why it's going to be good. Probably because, well, she was a Remainer. She didn't want to leave in the first place.
Well, this is it. This is it. And this was the kind of stance that I would have, if there is going to be a general election in November, or this year for that matter, then and I said this to you before. I said this to you when we were speaking originally in the Sunday stream, is that I would expect the Tory party to lead on an international footing, saying, oh, you know, we're going to mitigate this risk of Brexit through international trade deals with India, China, Africa, South America, wherever, right? And I would expect the Labour Party to bring it, okay, this is Brexit, this is what's going to happen, these are how we're going to mitigate it, and yes, it will be shitty for a little bit, but at the end of it, we'll have, you know, a domestic manufacturing economy to die for, and it will all be based on green technologies, and everything will be cheap because it's being locally produced, and manufacturing. So you'd have a good job with decent representation, with good trade union support. You know, all the fluff that goes with it. You know? Be based like just like they did in the last election. Essentially, is they'll bring it back down to domestic issues, the things that really affect, you know, the people on your street, your next door neighbor. What's your next door neighbor talking about? Well, they're talking about the state of the NHS. What's the family down the street, you know, with 2 kids in elementary school? What are they talking about? Well, they're talking about the fact that their local school hasn't got a shit roll. You know, these are the things that they're really going to, you know, strive on. I mean, if you want to give us a little bit of detail on the Corbyn speech, because I know you did a video yesterday on it, so if you could do a quick 2 minutes on that, that'll be great.
Sure. Well, in the Corbyn speech, it was talking about increasing manufacturing in the UK, not only trying to sort of perhaps revive a few industries that have fallen by the wayside recently, but he talked about trying to make the most out of the fact that the pound's fallen, because obviously the pound having fell post-referendum was bad for when we were importing things into the country, because obviously it was going to cost more if we were buying abroad. But exporting out of the country, we'd have the opportunity to export quite cheaply, which would obviously be good for us in terms of business. Now, what Corbyn had to say in regards to that was, you know, it's been, you know, how long since this happened? Better part of 2 years now. The government has not introduced any policies to sort of take advantage of this. And that is like the one advantage of Brexit that we've had so far, which I think he was absolutely spot on about. My criticism would also be, but hang on a minute, Jezza, I haven't exactly heard you banging on about it a lot either. So he's pointing out a flaw in the government's strategy or lack of strategy in this department. But he and the Labour Party hadn't exactly been shouting from the rooftops over the last couple of years to do something in this vein anyway, or at least if they have, I missed it. And
well, yeah, all we've read about and all we've seen is yes, that's very nice, but what are you doing about anti-Semitism? Yes, what are you doing about anti-Semitism? Yes, manufacturing. Yeah, we don't want to hear about what you're doing about anti-Semitism. You know, that's all we've heard from.
I mean, Certainly in the press conference we saw from the actual manufacturing speech the other day, that seemed to be the case. But no, that was just a slight critique there, because I was like, yes, Labour pointed out a very, you know, I'm pleased that they've come around to saying, yes, this is what we should be doing, and they're right to point out the flaw in the Tories. But it kind of in line with a lot of what Labour had to say in the manufacturing speech. I was very much behind a lot of it. But I just kind of thought, why couldn't we have had this a year ago? Yeah. Why couldn't we have had this 2 years ago? This is what I was crying out to hear from them, you know?
Well,
but anyway, I was going to say you wanted a quick summary of a few more points on what the actual speech was as well. So it also talked about having companies that are based in the UK, not sort of building cheap labour factories abroad, but again, trying to bring some of the actual manufacturing in-house again, and the ability for the government, even when it chooses, to be able to sort of support certain businesses or industries within the country to help them compete against other businesses abroad. There was a big bullet point list in front of me yesterday, but that's the most of them that I can remember off the top of my head. But basically trying to look out for British jobs. That's probably the best way to summarize it.
By investing in SMEs and in the manufacturing sector.
Yes. Small and medium businesses,
enterprises,
yeah.
So does your lighter work, mate? Do you need a light?
It does. I got there in the end.
So yeah, the only thing I didn't see in that I was thinking about today was obviously the food thing. So obviously we need to start growing our own food again. I mean, you know, or producing our own food, but on a much larger scale, because we only produce food to export and we import most of our food. So I mean, that would be my only kind of other thing that wasn't addressed in there, and that would be embracing technology and vertical farms and that kind of stuff. But like I said to you, was it yesterday that we were talking about the speech?
Yes, it was yesterday.
Yeah. It was yesterday, right? So, but like I said to you at the time, yes, it's all very nice seeing these things, but it's all a bit broad strokes, you know. I'd like to see, you know, a bit more detail and a bit more meat on the bones, as it were, when it comes to the Labour plans.
There's probably something else to add to that as well, which is obviously what Corbyn has spoken about in his speech yesterday is building on top of what he had already indicated as sort of Labour Brexit policy, if you want to call it that, sort of from his speech a few months back when he was talking about not the customs union but a customs union. And his vision still ties into that at the moment as well. So there is kind of a slight, that there's still a similar flaw in Labour's proposition, even though so much more of what they're now saying, I'm like, yes, this was much needed. There's still a slight flaw in Labour's proposition in the same way that there is with the Tory proposition, which is that some of Labour's expectations of what they're going to be able to get out of the European Union, they've got their, I think they're called their red lines or their tests or whatever for, you know, we want to get exactly the same benefits as the single market and this, that, and the other. That much I'm still fairly unsure about, because I think, well, that still doesn't look like it's going to be the case for either party to achieve. I feel like we've been down the have your cake and eat it road, and it's been fairly apparent at this point that we're not likely to get that. So there are probably still, like, say, for example, if we were to have an election tomorrow, Tories are out, Labour get in, and then they're doing the Brexit policy, Labour could present what they've got to the European Union now. And I think the EU would still have several heavy red lines on it.
Sure. Yeah. I don't disagree with that at all. So assuming that I'm right and that there is a general election this year, so this is before, you know, the final guillotine drops as far as Brexit is concerned, who will you vote for? Do you think? Let's assume that it's in November. Okay, just picking it out my ass. Like, let's assume it's November. Who will you vote for at this stage?
I'd probably still vote for the Labour Party. That's probably the best I can give you. I mean, there's no way in hell I'll be voting Tory. because number one, they're the Tories, and number two, they've also now fudged Brexit. So that's two very big red crosses against their name at the moment.
I was the reason again, half the reason why I brought up the history, what with the Greens being a massive Remainer party now, you wouldn't be going back to the Greens either.
Oh no, I certainly wouldn't be going back to the Greens.
That really disappointed me about the Greens, actually, the fact that they've just gone like full on Remain, because I was a Green voter before Corbyn as well. So,
yeah, I mean, I get it that I think the Greens' pitch is to say that they're Remain and reform. You know, they don't just want to stay in the EU, but they want to try and improve it, which is like fair dues. I don't necessarily think that's achievable, but hey, at least you've got the goal in mind. You know, at least you recognize some of the ills of the European Union. But what kind of gets me a little bit is that the Greens are opposing Brexit and want to keep us in the EU with such gusto, you know, with such enthusiasm, like Liberal Democrat levels of enthusiasm. And it's like, well, the Labour Party's finally managed to spot some of the advantages of Brexit here. But it was only, I think it was only this morning, actually, I saw a tweet from Caroline Lucas who'd penned an article that said something like, no, Jeremy, there aren't any advantages of Brexit. And I just think, well, there we are, I'm afraid.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah. I mean, this is a party that ran on in 2010 that were, you know, pro-proportional representation, direct democracy, yeah? And the moment that you have... you know, one of the biggest democratic exercises in the country pretty much ever. They're just like, no, we're going to stay. I mean, that position, that Remain and reform position was good before the EU ref. But we voted since then, mate. You know, you know, exactly. Like, we've actually had the referendum, you know.
I mean, people pushing for a soft Brexit is one thing. Even though I don't consider that to be what Brexit is supposed to be, at the very least, with people pushing for a soft Brexit, there's the conceit that they at least accept that we're leaving the European Union. They just want to keep us incredibly tightly tied to it as if we were still part of the EU. But kind of the position for people like clamoring for second referendums and saying there's still time to exit from Brexit and all the rest of this, those are kind of the worst people in my opinion, because it's not even they're fighting for what kind of a Brexit we're going to have. It's very much we still think there's time to undo the biggest democratic exercise ever undertaken in this country. And that's what I kind of have real contempt for, unfortunately. Sorry, the cat's knocking plates down. What are you doing? Behave yourself. Carry on.
Okay,
Sorry, anyway, that was my point. That was my point.
Yeah. I've got one more question for you. And yes, it is still on Brexit. The reason why I've stayed with Brexit is because essentially that was the central pillar of your "I'm leaving Labour because of I'm leaving Labour" video.
Yeah, it was the core pillar. We can speak about some of the other reasons as well if you like, but you know, I'll make no bones about the fact that was one of the very key aspects to it.
Okay, this is going to be my last question on Brexit, and then we can talk about some of the other issues, because we have been talking for 52 minutes so far. So, and I don't want to go much. If we do go past an hour, I don't want to go too much past an hour. And I also want to open it up to the floor. So now there's been some investigations, and there's been a fine put out with the Vote Leave. One of the groups that handles the Vote Leave has had a fine because of their spending.
Overspending, yes. There was a smaller group. I forget what they were called, but they also had the word "leave" in them. And there was money apparently siphoned through one of these groups, but the two were closely associated. So in essence, they were able to spend a few extra hundreds of thousands of pounds than they were supposed to.
And I understand the investigation is still ongoing. As far as I understand it.
Yes, I believe so. I think the Electoral Commission has issued a fine to the Vote Leave group, so they obviously seem to have deemed them to have broken the law.
Yeah. how does that change your opinion on how it was dealt with? And because, I mean, it only really makes a difference in my mind because it was so close. Because it was really just a couple of points either way, you know?
Yes.
If it had been a route, say it had been 60-40 or, you know, 55-45, you know, a good few points, then I wouldn't really care so much, if you like, because it was a small group that's been found to be found guilty so far, right? But because it was so close and it was a small group, this is almost exactly why Cambridge Analytica was such a big story. Because, you know, in the interview, he said, you know, we generally have the ability to swing and to add a point or take away a point here and there due to targeted ads. Yeah. This is why it's such a big issue, because the Brexit vote was so slim. What are your opinions on that? So I haven't heard you talk about it yet.
Oh, I've spoke about it on the channel when the fine was announced, at least in a stream about a few Brexit issues. But yeah, as far as it goes, I mean, what you said about Cambridge Analytica, and you know, we might be able to add a point, take away a point, etc. I believe, obviously, that by targeted advertising, that's, you know, it's the same with any advertising. They say, well, why would they bother doing it if it didn't have some kind of an effect? But I still very much have my doubts about, you know, if it's at all possible to measure how much of an effect that had. If you know, if you get what I'm saying, like, do we know how many internet users were targeted with specified ads? Do we know of that number of internet users how many changed their votes because they saw a recommended article on Twitter or Facebook or something? I you know, I'm not able to answer that. I don't know if you are.
No. To be honest, I don't think the data's there, to be fair. To go from one thing, like to have targeted ads on Facebook, and then to have that same person's voting record is it's connecting two different sources of information, which I think would be a breach of privacy unless people will volunteer that kind of information, and then you wouldn't get enough people to volunteer that kind of information, especially because of what happened in was it Dispatches that broke the Cambridge Analytica Channel 4? It was Channel 4, wasn't it?
I'll say one thing if I can, and you might perhaps think this is whataboutery, so feel free to accuse me of that in a moment if that's what you think it is. But right, vote leave, overspent, got fined, rightly so. Anyone who participates in any election or referendum who breaks electoral law, there needs to be a penalty for that, and it needs to be discouraged, because that is no good for our democratic system. Absolutely.
Exactly right.
Right. But I would say this: before the official campaign period, in which there was spending allocations to the, you know, designated vote remain and designated vote leave groups, you did have a letter sent out by the government. A pro-Remain letter. Yeah, I'm sure you remember it. Very clearly a pro-Remain letter sent out to millions of households, telling them about all the ills of potentially choosing to leave the European Union. And that was at an expense to the taxpayer to the tune of about £9 million. Now, obviously, that in itself did not fall within the remit of the official campaigning period, and therefore it was, you know...
What about
you said, allow me to let me.
I'm joking.
Okay, I was going to say, just let me finish the point. Now, I'm not saying that in terms of trying to negate the wrongdoing of the Leave campaign, because clearly there were laws broken there. But what I'm saying is, if we're talking about influence being exerted outside of the regular way of doing things in that referendum, then I don't know, by a factor of something like 18-1, Remain got a hell of a lot more extra money spent for them than Leave did.
But Remain had the government behind them and the opposition.
They did. But the point was, what was it right for the government?
Granted.
Yeah.
It's a great point. It's a great point. And if, say, for instance, I don't know, let's go crazy, right? and in this weird like parallel universe, that in the next election, oh God, I can't believe I'm going to say this. There's going to be a 320 seat swing to the Lib Dems, right? And they get their people's vote, right, on the final deal. Right? So there's a people's vote.
Yeah, okay.
I really can't say this with a straight face. So you like, please bear with me. I know this. I'm really just. I'm trying to grab clouds at the moment. So yeah, they're going to essentially have a people's vote. Now, do you think that the way that referendum will be run will be completely different? Because let's face it. I mean, the original EU referendum was a fucking shit show, just as much as this whole Brexit fiasco is a fucking shit show, right? Now, there was no voice from the left, for example, right, for Brexit, right? There was no voice from the left for Remain either, right? There were, but they were very minute.
It was largely a conservative-dominated debate, really, wasn't it?
It was largely debated only from the right. Do you think that what's happened over the last 2 years and the way it was run, do you think that will make a difference in the way that the next one would, if that's a big fucking if, I know the size of fucking Jupiter, but that's a big fucking if because I think it is only the Lib Dems at the moment that are kind of lobbying for a people's vote right now.
Well, I think probably and the Greens, and I'd assume also the SNP, and maybe Plaid. You know, kind of all probably all of the centre left parties other than Labour.
Yeah. It doesn't really add up to a whole lot, though, does it? So there's a coalition.
Was there a question in there somewhere?
Yeah. Do you think it would change the way that the referendum will be done in referenda, especially something as important as that, will be held in the future?
What if there were to be a second referendum? Would it have a different outcome to the first?
But it's not a second referendum. It's a people's vote.
It's a first referendum on the final deal. That's what it is.
That's what it is. It just so happens we have exit from Brexit in one of the choices. You know?
I mean, I think that would probably depend what the questions on the ballot paper are. Is it a rerun of the original referendum, or is it sort of, you know, are you leaving with no deal? Are you accepting a deal that's on the table? Along those lines, because I know at the very least from most polling that I've seen, broadly speaking, most Brexiteers are still Brexiteers, most Remainers are still Remainers. So it was a bloody close vote the first time round, and if we had another binary choice option, if it were leave or remain and it was a binary choice option, then we'd probably get an equally close split. If it were down to no deal, accepting a deal, something along those lines, then that's probably a little bit more tricky. But I don't know. Do you have like a hypothetical referendum set of questions in mind?
Okay, so obviously you got leave no matter what. So that's obviously hard. Fucking hard.
No deal, stroke hard Brexit.
No deal, stroke hard Brexit. I mean, these terms, they're all shit anyway. But yeah, let's say no deal, hard Brexit, remain, and then you've got whatever deals on the table at the time. Now, here's the thing. Obviously, what we've got to take, or you know, would be the Chequers deal, which is, of course, has gone anyway. So, like, it would be the Chequers deal, but the EU would never agree to it. So, what do? Do you negotiate a deal, right? Which is going to take on Jacob's tree frogs. He says nothing's agreed till everything's agreed, and of course, it's going to be, you know, hour 11 before we actually strike up a deal on the final day of Article 50. And can you then like take it to the public and say, okay, we've got a deal, and it's like the final day. There would obviously need to be an extension. Okay, we need to hold a referendum, so that would have to be in there. And then say it's the Chequers deal. So you got the Chequers deal, leave or remain. That's
okay.
I would assume it would be. But
okay, so if it was leave / no deal, the Chequers deal, or stay in the EU, those are the options on the table.
Yeah.
I think that first of all, it's probably interesting to talk about which option each of the major political parties would be backing, because that will probably have some relevance to sort of what they'll be trying to instruct their voters to vote for.
Yeah.
I think the Tories, or the government, I ought to say, would be pushing for Theresa May's Chequers deal, of course. But probably the Mogs on the back benches would be pushing for a no deal. How many of them would be pushing for a no deal as opposed to Chequers? Maybe out of the total number of MPs in Parliament, maybe a few DUPs to throw in there and your odd Kate Hoey or something. Maybe something like 30, 40, 50, something in that range would be pushing for a no deal. To accept May's Chequers deal, you'd have like the bulk of the Tory party, and obviously if May's still in place, the thrust of the government. I dare say you'd probably get some Labour MPs supporting the Chequers deal as well. Although I'm not sure about that. This is what I find a bit tricky, because I know that for certain Labour MPs, quite a few of them would probably like to stop Brexit altogether. But I imagine a few of them would settle for the Chequers deal because it's at least a fairly soft Brexit. It's not the hardest thing it could possibly be, so they might back that. But I struggle with that one a little bit, because I think that Corbyn will be getting pushed in a few different directions. He'll be, on the one hand, tempted to try and undermine the government, of course, because if you can get the public to reject the government's deal that it's taken them 2 years to get, then my God, what a coup for the opposition there. But he'll probably be under some pressure by certain MPs within his own party to say, oh no, we ought to be remaining at this point. And even smaller minorities saying we ought to leave. And obviously, the Lib Dems, the Greens, everyone else would be saying we should remain in the EU, and the Kippers would be saying we should leave without a deal. That was incredibly long-winded. The question was, how do I think it would pan out? Basically, the actual vote. I really don't know. I suspect if it was the three options on the cards, I genuinely don't know. If it were just two options on the cards, it might be a bit easier to predict. But with three,
again, like you're going to end up having a referendum on the referendum, aren't you? You're going to say, we're going to have a referendum on should we have a referendum on whether we should have these choices on the referendum. Then we're going to have another referendum on these choices or whatever. We're going to have a referendum on whether we should have a referendum. And it just gets so diluted and so fucking stupid. G Whistler just made a point. Sorry, I've been ignoring you guys in the side chat. The EU aren't going to accept the Chequers deal. Yes, G. We're just dealing in hypotheticals. That's all. Okay. But yeah. On that note, because it's
can I say this one really quickly? I think what you'd probably see is the Leave voters of 2016 being split between voting for no deal and May's Chequers deal, and the Remainers would be split between the Chequers deal and remain in the EU. That's what I'd broadly speculate.
And the whole thing would just be diluted all over again. People would be arguing over the different dinner tables. Your dog will fall out with your cat, and then before you know it, frogs are falling from the sky, and God knows it's all turned to shit. Anyway, but yeah, let's talk. Fucking hell, 1 hour. Okay, cool. So Brexit aside, then we've dealt with that. Like I said, it was a central pillar, and we've dealt with it now. And we've decided that you are going to vote for Labour in the next general election, so that's good.
Probably. No promising, but probably. I'm just basing that on, like, I'm imagining what I would likely decide were another election to come along, and I think, odds on, I'd end up voting for Labour, regardless.
It's going to be November.
The £10 is waiting for you, Captain.
It's going to be November, I'm telling you. All right, so would you like to talk us through some other reasons? I've got two here. I've got written in front of you. Two.
All right.
You were talking about alternative voting systems. So you haven't heard anything about Labour talk about proportional representation or any other voting system, which is quite interesting considering they try to be quite progressive. And I maybe have an idea behind that. And the other thing is obviously the legalization of weed. So these were two things that you did bring up on your.
My two most important topics behind Brexit: electoral reform and cannabis legalization, of course.
Well, you tell me, are they?
What my most important issue? No, I'd probably not. I'd say I'll put it this way. Actually, it's probably a good way to explain my priorities. Say if I were to be like ranking them out of 10, a number one spot and a number 10 spot.
Hang on a minute. You must understand that we've already been through anti-austerity, anti-homeless, anti-war and interventionist and green energy. So aside from these core things with Brexit, then moving on from that Labour doesn't address and that you're quite disappointed on them about would be proportional representation and weed. Obviously the others that they do.
Those are two additional ones to list. Yes. So if I can just make my point really quickly, what I was going to say is, in terms of my the issues that are most important to me, because I think James Fielding had sort of said to me way earlier on in the side chat, so is Brexit your number one issue then? I'd say, like, when you see the polling where the public's asked what their number one issue is, and it'll be like, and I'm plucking these out of the air, by the way, but, say, for example, 30% say the NHS and 20% say Brexit and 15% say housing and so on, right? I'd say for me, I'm probably like, Brexit is my number one issue, but the sum of all of the other issues adds up to more than Brexit.
Interesting.
So okay. Brexit's not like an over 50% thing for me. It's just like the highest priority.
Okay. Do you want to talk us through that then? What I want to narrow down are issues that you feel that Labour didn't address in the last election, or you feel that you can't see it in the future, in the tea leaves, if you like.
Sure.
Heard no whispers of it, or in what you've heard so far. So
yeah, that's fine. I mean, these in themselves aren't particular things that have arisen anytime recently, because it's been kind of fairly clear to me that Labour don't stand for these anyway. But they're just kind of additional points of difference between me and the party. But electoral reform.
That you have supported the Labour Party since June 2015. So yes.
Indeed. Well, I'd say the first one, like you said, is electoral reform. A proportional representation voting system and more direct democracy.
So what's wrong with the first one then?
Oh yeah, well, I'm kind of going through some of the ones you've listed already, for that matter.
All right, okay, cool. Go on,
but yeah, I mean, those are important to me for the future of democracy in this country. Mind you, not to move us back onto Brexit for too long, but Brexit's important to me for the future of democracy in this country as well. One of the core reasons for my wanting to leave is for the United Kingdom to be the total arbiter and decision maker of issues that affect the United Kingdom.
Indeed.
And I want that built upon an incredibly strong democracy where those decisions are made as much as possible by the people in this country. So it all ties together somewhat. You're right, yeah. As far as PR, more referendums, etc., Labour don't really have much inclination to move towards that, not from what I've seen. It's electorally in their own self-interest, no doubt. I mean, if we were to move from first past the post to proportional rep, then Labour would not return as many MPs.
Of course, but there was a referenda on that. I know it wasn't proportional representation, but it was alternative voting ideas or systems. But that referenda went to no. I didn't hear much about it on the MSN at the time. MSM, sorry, at the time the referendum was going on, which was weird, you know, because I was really kind of watching anything political at the time, because it was in 2012. Is that right? The AV, the alternative.
It may have been 2011 actually. I think it could have been 11. Yes, it was, because I was not old enough to vote at the time it was happening.
Okay. But anyway, moving on. So, do you think it's because of the result of that original referenda that they've decided not to dig up the old corpse of AV?
I mean, I think that the corpse of AV should remain buried in a very deep grave, to be honest with you. You know, the Lib Dems were originally pushing for PR, and then when they got into coalition with the Tories, that's coalition politics for you in a nutshell. You go in with PR on your manifesto, and you come out with an AV referendum instead. As far as I see it, both of the main parties aren't inclined for any sort of an alternative voting system, because first past the post benefits the two main parties of the country.
Exactly.
Whereas every other minor party out there in the country support an alternative voting system, probably because they benefit from it. Yes. Because the smaller parties struggle under first past the post. So in that sense, the positions that the parties hold at the moment is no different from what they held 10 years ago or 20 years ago, as far as I'm aware. So I don't think any change or lack of change in Labour's policy is particularly sort of predicated on that 2011 referendum. I think it kind of is much more integral to just what they view as being the best for them electorally.
Okay, maybe you can clear this up for me, because I only heard of it, this original referendum. Can you stretch your memory back to when the referendum was taking place? Now, as far as I was concerned, when it comes to AV, I thought what the referendum was saying is that if you vote yes to AV, what you're basically saying is that you're saying yes for there to be a debate within the House of Commons to talk about all the different alternative voting systems, which would include proportional representation.
Well, I'll tell you what then. Let me just bring up the Wikipedia page for it in front of me, so we can both be clear on exactly what it entailed. Because from my recollection, at least, it was on a particular proposed voting system as opposed to first past the post. But let me have a look. The United Kingdom alternative. Do you mind if I screen share this with you?
No, go for it. Go for it.
Sure. Right. I'll bring this up in just a second then. You'll have to click on my little icon just so it's sharing with everybody. Right. Can you see that?
Present to everybody. There we go.
Right, so the United Kingdom Alternative Vote Referendum, also known as the UK-wide referendum on the parliamentary voting system, was held, blah, 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 as part of the Lib Dem agreements. The referendum concerned whether or not to replace first... Go away, Swagbucks. I don't want any codes from you at the moment. The referendum concerned whether or not to replace the present first past the post system with the alternative votes method, which was the first national referendum to be held across the United Kingdom in the 21st century. So the alternative vote method in itself was a specific type of voting system. Yeah, it wasn't to say like a referendum on the prospect of alternative voting methods. It's like much like PR or single transferable vote or whatever. It is in itself a specific voting system.
Right. That's where the confusion came in then.
No worries.
For me at the time. Yeah, it's just well shafted. Was asking what's AV in the side chat, so I thought we'd clear that up. Okay.
No, you had me second guessing myself for a moment then, because when you said that, I thought, well, I was pretty sure it was about the AV system. But I need to go back and check now.
Well, like I said, I only heard about it like years afterwards, and I was like, well, why didn't I hear about it at the time in like you say 2011? So yeah.
I mean, the referendum itself had a fairly low turnout from what I remember. In fact, I'll be able to find out what the turnout was. It was come on, give me a turnout. All right, I'll have this for you in a moment if you want to carry on. I can bring it up for you.
And the other thing that I listed was legalization of weed. Now, I completely agree, and we spoke about the Labour position. For anybody in the side chat that doesn't know the Labour position on the legalization of cannabis, what they basically saying is they're open to tests being done for the medicinal purposes of derivative cannabis products. I believe that is the position, but they haven't got anything concrete in their manifesto so far with regards to legalizing weed. So, especially not for recreational use, which is, let's be honest, is what we all want to know about. So,
yeah. Unless you want to go to the GP with a bad back or a nasty chesty cough and hope that they might be able to offer you something.
Well, you know, that's very different to actually being available on the NHS or privately through Bupa.
And also, obviously, there could well be a big difference between cannabis-derived medicines for people with, you know, epileptic conditions or whatever, and in the way that we see in the States, actual cannabis, you know, that you can smoke being dispensed via the NHS. There'd probably be, you know, we're yet to see what would actually be entailed with purely just the medicinal option anyway at the moment.
Yeah. So what's your position on the legalization of weed?
Decriminalize it, legalize it, sell it in shops, tax it, and probably as simple as, basically.
Well, I said this when we were talking about it on your Sunday stream. I said, you know, it could be a way to revitalize the high streets, because the high streets are dying because of places like you know, Amazon, and even you know, major stores are closing. You know, Pound Store, Toys R Us, Woolworths, Marks and Spencers. There are a lot of high street stores that you're used to seeing that are just closing down, and this is I see there are only two ways to revitalize the high street, because let's face it, it's a place to go, it's a place to socialize, it's a corner of the community, and it's a bit like the local pub. You know, the local pub should be there, so you know, people can go there for a pint, and you know, the high street should be there, you know, something to do on a Saturday afternoon when you're bored, just stroll around the shops, see what you're doing. You know, cannabis cafes is one. If you're not going to do anything with that space, either turn it into housing, cannabis cafes, or art galleries, so local artists can contribute and get their shit seen, right? Those are the three ideas I've got with regards to revitalizing the high street. And yeah, weed cafes or smoking cafes is a similar thing that you might get in Amsterdam. Is my number one choice, because it is a taxable commodity, which then should be locally spent to hospitals, schools, infrastructure, or whatever, you know.
Oh yeah, I mean, you're preaching to the converted here, man.
I'm not. I'm not really preaching. It's not just, obviously not just for you, but it's for our 10 people watching. But
oh, of course,
of course. But yeah, I mean, what is there anything beyond that you would like to talk about? I am actually quite disappointed in the Labour Party, as just as much as you are when it comes to that kind of stuff. But I think with regards to Labour, okay, let's stay on weed, and then I'll talk about voting after that. But go for it. I mean,
sure. What I was going to say with the Labour Party and cannabis, I'll just say this briefly. I do expect that at some point in the future, the Labour Party will adopt the policy of the legalisation of weed. I don't know exactly how soon it's going to be. I'd anticipate that probably by the time the next election comes along, whenever it is, if it's a few years from now and they've had time to do their research into medicinal cannabis or whatever, there's a fair chance that the Labour Party will have some kind of legislation on the cards for medicinal cannabis or cannabis derived medicines.
2022?
Yeah, but by 2022, I'd say odds on they'll have something to offer in that manifesto on that. But going sort of further on from there, I'd say eventually they are going to come around to that position, because enough states in America, enough other countries in the world are starting to come around to that position. I think it's an inevitability at this point. So sooner or later they'll get there. But obviously I'm disappointed they're not there at the moment. You know, I'd quite like them to be.
Yeah. Considering how much they stole from the 2010 Green Manifesto in their 2017 manifesto, I'm surprised that's one they just went no. Well, I'm not surprised actually. I'm not surprised actually, considering that there are a lot of people in the Labour Party that have been in the Labour Party for a very long time, and they know it's just not a vote winner, which is a problem. When you're supposed to be a government in waiting, if you put legalized cannabis in your manifesto, there are going to be certain people of a certain age. I'm not trying to be ageist here, by the way. Of a certain age, they just think, oh no, it's terrible, the snowball effect, blah blah blah. You know, all the same arguments you hear over and over again that we know is bullshit, because there's studies out there to prove it's bullshit. Oh, you know, you smoke cigarettes, then you get onto cannabis, and the next thing you know, you're injecting heroin in your penis in a...
It's a slippery slope, isn't it?
It's a slippery slope. You know? So, yeah. Have you ever been to Portugal? Mate, go to Portugal. But anyway. So yeah. So that's weed. Done.
Yeah.
We can agree, in today's climate, if you are one of the two main parties, i.e. Labour or Tory, you can agree that it's not really a vote winner in today's climate.
I don't know. I think polling that we've seen recently seems to show that most of the public's in favour of it. But I think you're right that both the main parties, they don't really feel brave enough for it, and with the Tories more so than Labour, it doesn't seem to be particularly what they'd be after doing in the first place.
Yeah, fair enough.
But I'll say this much, because it's fair points to make, right? So we've got, you know, so far we've spoken about Brexit, electoral reform, cannabis legalization, etc. Right? Now, some of these are fairly minor points. Brexit's a fairly big plank, but you know, when it's other little things where I just kind of go, oh, you know, the Labour Party's a bit too SJW for me, or oh, they don't have a proper immigration policy, etc. Kind of all, and you can quiz me on those in a moment if you like. But kind of all of these things taken together, you know, that plus electoral reform plus cannabis legalization, bits and bobs around the edges. None of this particularly takes away from the many things that the Labour Party wants to do, which I support them in doing. You know, the nationalisation projects, the better funding of the NHS, higher wages. We know that much already, right? But what it is for me, at least, is to say that I'm happy to go out there and vote for a party. And as I've said, I probably will vote Labour in the next election. But for me to... When I chose to join a party, Labour was the first ever party I'd decided to join in my sort of young political life. And that was very much because of Corbyn and the Corbyn agenda. I wanted to see the Labour Party dragged away from the neoliberal Blairites and moved in a much more positive, you know, a better direction, the sort of one that I wanted to see them in. That's happened now to some degree. They're still kind of wrestling with the Blairites in the sort of the internal civil war of the Labour Party at present. But since that time has come along, I have realised that there are still several things which the Labour Party and I are rather separate on policy-wise. And as far as some of the decisions of the Labour Party, now, of course, we will probably both agree that the way that the Labour Party is treated in the press, the way that there's scandal,
it's not the Labour Party. It's not the Labour Party, it's Jeremy Corbyn in particular.
Well, yes. Jeremy Corbyn and his supporters, but by extension, Labour as well. But of course, it's worth saying that many of those who are kind of stoking that fire are MPs of the Labour Party on the right of it as well. Yeah. But nonetheless, despite that, there are still decisions that Corbyn himself has made that, although I'm broadly on board with what he's got to say, I'll still notice flaws in the guy.
Of course, he's not the finished article. He came straight from the backbenches to the leader of the Labour Party. When has that ever happened? You know?
Exactly, yeah. So he's certainly improved since his time as a backbencher. And I'd certainly prefer him to Prime Minister Theresa May. No doubt about it. I'd much sooner see a Corbyn government than a Theresa May government. But it's just kind of over the time since I joined the party, it has dawned on me somewhat that I'm probably not as in love with Corbyn as I was, say, in 2015. You know, I'm not probably as much of an ardent Corbynite or Corbynista or whatever the phrase we want to use is as I was back then. And for me, for matter of, my overall views towards Labour aren't awfully that much different. They're still my party of government of choice, if you will. But to be a member of that party, to be formally associated with that party, and to be giving that party money, that feels like a step slightly further that I probably no longer feel I'm quite enough on board with Team Labour that I'd be like, yes, I'd be pinning my colours to that mast. So I'm kind of basically I'm just now in the position of kind of, you know, a person who's probably going to vote Labour but isn't a Labour member. You know, it's not an awful, like, it's not an awfully massive departure. It's not as if I've quit Labour and it's like, right, now I'm joining UKIP or joining the Social Democratic Party or something along those lines. It was just kind of it was just something that had sort of been niggling me for some time, really. That there were enough points of difference where I felt that as a Labour supporter, there are things that the Labour Party not. Oh, have I? Let me know when I'm back.
You're back.
Am I back? Jolly good.
You need to go back over the last 10 seconds, please. Mate.
Oh, the last 10 seconds. Oh, okay. So I've lost my place now. I was basically going to say that as much as I still broadly support Labour, there's enough about Labour and the leadership of Labour that I would not wish to try and defend in the terms of being an official supporter of them. You know, when people will say to me, "Oh, you know, you're a member of the Labour Party. How do you feel like this, that, and the other that they've been doing?" And I go, not big on it, to be honest. You know, that appointment of the what was it? Do you remember the trans activist who said all white people are racist, and they made her, like, you know, head of that equality committee or something along those lines? Now, you know, individual gaffes here and there, I'm like, you know, every party makes gaffes. That's not really a problem. But it's little things like that where I'd go, why on earth is the party I support doing that? I can't justify that. I couldn't attempt to justify that.
She was sacked by a makeup deal as well. She lost
L'Oreal. I think it was.
Yeah, it's quite a big one. I can't remember her name now.
Oh Christ! No, someone in the side chat will remember what it was, and then I'll be really annoyed because it was right on the tip of my tongue. No, I've lost it for the time being. It'll come back to me wanting it.
Okay. So, Monroe Bergdorf.
Oh, that was the
Monroe.
One.
Yeah. Yeah, transgender Monroe Bergdorf on L'Oreal firing. So yeah, it was Monroe, what's her face, and then she went on to she had a shouting match with Piers Morgan, didn't she?
Oh, did I never saw that actually.
Yeah. That was interesting. And no, let's keep out of that anyway, because then we're into IdPol then, and yeah. And that was again one of your things that you didn't kind of like about the Labour Party. You didn't like how they get so into identity politics so much. I mean, I do understand it because it does reek of SJW shit, but it does have to be addressed, you know. But again, going back to your point before, it doesn't help when you employ someone like Monroe Bergdorf, who actually ends up becoming quite regressive. You know,
certainly not. Just because, and I'll say this much, just because, we want to win on the progressive front with a number of different issues. I'm still very much on board with many of the aims of what you would call the progressive left. But there are certain people who have incredibly toxic ways of going about it. There's a right way to get progress and there's the wrong way to get progress. And in my opinion, things like political correctness or increased leaning on identity politics, certainly bringing people like Monroe Bergdorf into the fold is most certainly the wrong way to be going about it.
Well, then, obviously it does happen on both sides of the aisles. Again, maybe I'm doing a bit of whataboutery, but
you're correct. You're absolutely correct. No, not on the whataboutery. Well, maybe perhaps slightly, but what I mean is, the Tories, fucking hell.
Toby, what's his face on the
Toby Young on Twitters. Fucking what was his face? Michael Fabricant with the picture of Sadiq Khan getting fucked by a pig. Boris Johnson and basically every gaff under the sun there. No, and even when we're talking about Tory policies, Windrush scandal, hostile environment policy, etc. All of those things are incredibly good reasons for why I'm not a conservative and why I wouldn't be joining the Tory party anytime soon.
Do you think...
but likewise, go on. Sorry.
No, go on.
But I was going to say, but likewise, a time came where I had to say, you know what, Labour gets it really bad. Corbyn supporters, Labour by extension, they get it really bad in the media. And for many, many occasions, for very unjustified reasons, there is a concerted campaign against them. However, in some of the decisions that they make, some of them I just can't stand by, and I go, well, you're not really helping yourself, Labour Party, And again, as I say, I'd like to see a Labour government as opposed to a Tory government. I'd like to see a lot of what Corbyn's got to offer in his manifesto, but there's just these little slight differences here and there, just maybe being on the wrong side of the culture wars, in my opinion, being on the wrong side of Brexit, in my opinion. There's just enough of it there where I say, no, I don't feel like a member of what the movement is trying to do. I feel like an associate.
I mean, you like you say, you'll carry on supporting Labour, but you'll never be an affiliate member. And I think there's a key distinction there. So you do not feel that you are, or you do not feel the justification in the party's actions to carry on sending them money.
I feel. Sorry, continue.
No, I was basically finished. That was essentially my point.
I was basically going to say, I feel like, as far as the Labour Party is concerned, if I'm a member of the Labour Party, if I identify myself as a member of the Labour Party and I'm actively supporting it in that sense, then there's an element of either having to accept the things in there that you don't like, which is fair. No political party is perfect for anybody. I of course understand that, but either you need to accept the things in there that you don't like, or you turn a blind eye to them, essentially. But when there are things that they're doing or standing for that you don't like, then once more there does continue to be that feeling of slight sort of hypocrisy, or a feeling of I'm not sure if I'd be willing to defend them on this or that or the other, But it's don't get me wrong, it's something that I've been in two minds about for a long time, and I still probably consider myself to be a bit torn on it now. It's not like since I decided to leave, I haven't thought, I wonder if that was the right decision. Maybe I should have stuck it out in the Labour Party, but it's kind of the cycle of me thinking does eventually come round to the idea of, well, it's about formally affiliating yourself with a party at the end of the day, which is kind of, a big step in terms of, the vast majority of people out there in the country are not formally affiliated with any political party. It's, a tiny minority, I think under 1 million people in the whole of the UK that are actually part of a political party. And in that sense, I just say I'm probably broadly more comfortable being one of those than a person within any party right now, but obviously the Labour Party most recently.
I would have put you, when you were affiliated, you were almost an activist. And do you think you're putting your because of this, and because of your video on the 14th of July, you're essentially becoming more Switzerland than activist.
Slightly, I suppose.
Because whether you like it or not, that label activist or Labour activist, because of your affiliation to the Labour Party, you cannot escape from. You must understand that, surely.
No, you're right. For the longest time, I'd bill myself as basically two things: a Labour supporter and a Brexiteer. You know, those were kind of my self-identifying labels there.
But the moment you put yourself online on YouTube, you then become an activist.
Yeah. Well, I mean, YouTube itself, you know, it should never be forgotten, is still a platform for propaganda.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, you know, despite my content being, you know, I'll make a few short videos making jokes about the different parties, and I'll give my opinions on this, that, and the other, and we'll do our streams and get different people on. Obviously, the platform that I have is still in a way pure propaganda. I might be a bit more balanced than some of the other YouTubers out there. But at the end of the day, it is just a transmitting beacon for my own thoughts and feelings into the screens of other people out there in the country. Basically, that's in a nutshell what it is. What was the question? I'm really sorry. I've gone off on a complete tangent again.
What I was basically what I was saying is before is when you were a Labour affiliate, you were essentially an
activist.
Yeah.
Yeah, I probably can't argue against that, can I? No, I wouldn't. I mean, I wouldn't choose the word for myself. I wouldn't describe myself as an activist, but I'd find it difficult to argue against someone else calling me an activist, because I probably tick a fair few of the criteria. I haven't ever done door knocking and heavy levels of participation.
This is the 2010s. So
it's the current year.
It's 2010s. So between 2010 and 2020, this is I feel it's a form of activism. You know, putting your shit on YouTube and spouting left-wing propaganda. I think is a form of activism.
well, that's why I can't disagree with it. As I say, I think my definition of the term still feels like it's a bit more closely tied to sort of real active participation within the party, but I can accept the definition you're offering, because in today's day and age, it's probably fairly accurate. Yeah. But in that sense, then, to carry on from that, I'd say that in terms of what I would ideally aim to do as Captain Switzerland, I'd sooner not be seen as an activist, even if that's very difficult. I'm sure many probably, well, maybe not anymore since I've left, but many, in which case, might have viewed me as either an activist for the Labour Party and most certainly an activist for Brexit. That's not the way that I try to see myself. I just try to see myself as a person who shares my opinions on things. I don't view myself as much of a campaigner per se, but I guess that if I'm going to be having this platform where I cover things that are happening in the news and I bring people on for their opinions, I'll make no bones about what my opinions are. But, you know, to not be a member of the Labour Party is probably just as advantageous towards that as to not have been a member of the Vote Leave campaign in Brexit. I'd be regretting that if I was at the moment.
Okay, you're such a great person to interview, because you just led me on to something else I wanted to talk to you about, and then like this will be the last one, and then we're going to open it up to the floor, so you guys get your questions ready for Captain Switzerland. Now,
there we go.
Now I see myself as I'm probably number one a socialist communist kind of. I mean, you've seen my political results, and
I have, yes.
They're pretty far left, right? And so I don't really see my channel as Activision. So and I kind of agree with you. I do, like I said to you in the past, I do it for therapeutic reasons rather than anything else. But going back to the Labour Party, I am a supporter of the Labour Party. I'm not an affiliated member, and I'm not a member of them. Okay, because it becomes very difficult with me here in Korea. I can vote for the next 7 years unless they change something, but to be a registered member, it is very, very difficult. So, and I see the Labour Party as basically the best game in town when it comes to my views. Would you agree with the Labour Party in your views right now? And this will be like probably your ending statement.
As far as being the best game in town goes, I'd probably still agree with that. It's like when you've asked me, you know, if there were a hypothetical general election around the corner, who would you end up voting for? And I say probably still Labour, because as far as all of the things that I want for the country, the Labour Party is aligned with, as opposed to any other party, and as opposed to any other party with any chance of actually getting into power, the Labour Party are still the most aligned with that. But I'd say it's like it's like I don't feel as if Labour is my party. I feel that they are the party that I'm inclined to support.
Sure.
And that's probably the distinction to make of where I feel that I've somewhat drifted over the last couple of years. They're the party that I've been most inclined to support, but from the position of being a voter in the country, deciding, you know, what the hell do I do with my vote?
Yeah, I mean, you're in a very similar position to me. I
think so, actually, because obviously you're quite to the left of the Labour Party, aren't you? And arguably, I'm obviously to the right of Corbyn. I'd say that I'm economically to the left of the neoliberals, at least. But we're in a similar sort of position that, you know, okay, let's say I'm a bit to the right of the Labour Party, you're obviously to the left of the Labour Party. Neither of us at this point are members of the Labour Party, but, you know, were we to get the opportunity in an election, we'd probably still both vote for them, even if they're not completely aligned with our views.
Exactly right, and that's where I see the you know, something that we do have in common, because, you know, it just so happens that right now the Labour Party is concurrent with my views and my politics, and if, for instance, there was a coup next month, another coup, and we get I don't know, a Yvette Cooper or God forbid, a Liz Kendall takeover,
or a Chuka Ramuna, for that matter.
Fuck. Are they so different? Like Chuka Ramuna and Liz Kendall? I think Liz Kendall's slightly to the right of Chuka Ramuna, but not much.
Have you ever played Street Fighter or any other fighting games?
Mate, Street Fighter 2 was my game. Street Fighter 2.
All right, well, imagine a big Zangief, okay? Imagine a big neoliberal Blairite Zangief. Right. And as you play through the game, you're able to unlock the different skins for Zangief. You know, Zangief dressed up as a builder, Zangief dressed up as a Mexican wrestler, and all this, that, and the other. As far as I see it, your Kendalls, your Amunas, your Coopers, etc., they are the same character with different skins.
Yeah,
that's how I kind of see them ideologically, at least.
Yeah. I don't know though. Liz Kendall though, she's far too right wing. She's proper red Tory. But anyway, we're not going to get into this because we've been chatting for 2 hours, and I was scared this was only going to be 15 minutes. So moving on, right? And again, this is my final question before we open up to the floor. I alluded to earlier that your videos were a kind of activision and almost a kind of propaganda for the Labour Party, especially during the 2017 general election. Have you gone back and watched those videos?
Oh no.
What about the 2015 ones?
I really struggle to watch old videos of mine.
You look so different, by the way.
Oh, I do. I always do. I've been doing YouTube for the better part of 10 years across different channels, and my appearance has changed just as regularly across the rest of it as it has for as long as you guys have known me.
With regards to how you look and how you present yourself on video, is you've definitely grown into your skin. You're much more handsome now than you were back then with the dodgy, spiky hair thing you had.
Well, you never know.
Grown into your skin.
I can't promise that I'm not going to move back to the spiky hair at some point in the future. There's no guarantees there, I'm afraid.
Keep the long hair; it suits you, mate.
Thank you. Anyway, I'm enjoying the long hair for now. To be honest, I quite like having it long.
Okay. So with regards to Activision, obviously, the propaganda for the Labour Party is obviously going to cease because you've left the Labour Party. But where do you see your channel going next? With regards, I'll assume that you're going to stay on the left. So I hope so, because otherwise I'm just going to fuck off now.
I don't imagine it changing too much. I think, yes, I'm going to remain on the left, or at least, my views are still broadly in line with what they were a week ago or a month ago, for that matter. But, yes, I'll concede there's probably some drift over the last few years. But I think, if anything, when like with when we were covering Corbyn's speech yesterday, I loved what I heard. Bring manufacturing back to the UK, British jobs, etc. And you were there in the stream with me. We were talking it up, and I said I thought it's fantastic, and we had a great time shitting on that Independent article. I think, as far as I
mean, it was fucking shit, man. Honestly,
it really was
badly written. But yeah, carry on.
I think, as far as my content moving forwards goes, whenever there are policies or things that the Labour Party is doing which I'm a fan of, which will continue to be a majority of it, then I'm still going to continue saying, yes, this is what should be happening for the country. This is why the Tories are on the wrong track, etc. In ways in which my content's going to change, it's probably fair to say that I think I feel that I have a freer hand for criticising the Labour Party now. I don't know when the next time is going to occur where I'm going to end up doing that. It will depend on what the Labour Party does that I disagree with. But I think I will feel freer to criticise the Labour Party now as a non-member, because I should hopefully be able to look at the Labour Party hopefully a little bit more objectively, in the same way that I tried to do it with the other parties. And I don't mean objectively in terms of not having opinions about them, because I obviously don't like the Liberal Democrats, for example, and I make it clear that I don't like the Lib Dems, but that's on the basis of what my own policy positions are. And in that kind of a vein, I think I ought to be doing the same with the Labour Party from now on. Sure. Which is, probably the majority of the time saying, yes, I think Labour's on the right track. They're doing the things that I think the country needs. But when they're in the wrong direction, not for me to then shy away because I go, oh, I'm supposed to be a Labour member or a Labour supporter. Is it really helping the side if I criticise Corbyn or whomever for this, that, or the other? So I hope, at least as far as the content goes, I'll feel a bit freer to criticise Labour when I think they need criticising. But I'm not expecting I'm going to suddenly, deviate over to the centre ground or the right anytime soon, if that's what the question was.
Well, it depends how much the Overton window shifts. If the Overton window shifts so far to the left, you might end up in the centre, and you'd be like, oh no, I'm a fucking centrist.
Mate, you never know. If suddenly, say, the Labour Party's policies were to really shift the Overton window that much, and
it would take the Tory party to shift to the left as well for you to become a centrist. But yeah, I don't see it happening.
Yeah, you'd have to get the Tories to start talking about higher wages and public ownership of things.
Oh no, they have been talking about higher wages, but of course there's no new money for that shit.
No.
Jack James, thank you for the first one. I will thank you for the tag.
Champ, if I may, just because it looks like we're about to move on to the questions, do you mind if I nip off and grab a drink, and I'll be back in a minute?
Yes,
smashing.
Of course. So yeah, what we're going to do now is we're going to move on to the questions. Thank you, Jack James, for the first one. If you could tag my name in the side chat, and then I can see it a bit better. And these can be questions to me or to Swiss on anything you've heard this afternoon for you guys. Sorry, and yeah, we'll hopefully get this done. So So while we wait for Captain Swiss to come back, you guys get your questions in. I want to say hello to people that have been joining us in the stream. So hello to Asim, hello to Jack James, hello to Shafted, hello to Adam West. Also, hello to Angels. Hope you're still there, Angels. Hello to Thomas Williams and Matt Hancock. Has obviously been censored tonight by G and Thomas. I hope G is still out there. And if you are, hello. Thank you for keeping an eye on those dodgy Tories. Are you back with us, Captain? Because we've got our first question.
I am indeed, yeah.
Okay. Do you think if the Corbyn Labour Party came out as vocal opposition to identity politics, would they be hammered on it by their detractors?
Oh, okay, interesting question. I mean, I imagine that I'd take your Sargons, for example, your Sargons of Akkad. I can't imagine him suddenly doing a 180 and then praising the Labour Party for it. You know, I'm sure he'd probably have some kind of a spin to sort of go, oh yeah, that they say that they're doing this, but really, ... You know, if you will. But you know, for me at least, as a position, I would absolutely welcome it. It's something that I'd love to see them do. I think probably the most opposition that they'd get from it wouldn't be from kind of the traditional Labour Party detractors. It wouldn't be from those on the right who criticise them anyway. I think it would probably open up a new field of criticism from those on the left, those who are very much into their identity politics, those who are probably you know, maybe like Green Party members or stuff along those lines. I think that you wouldn't get that much criticism from Labour's usual detractors. I think you'd probably get a new demographic of people criticising Labour from the cultural left rather than from the cultural right, if that makes sense.
What I think is you can't really have an opposition to identity politics, really. Identity politics is there. So you are either racist, so that's a part of your identity politics. So you're either racist, so you're talking about, you know, your proper, you know, Tommy Robinson nutcases, right? You're either ambivalent about it, or you either fight for you know, rights of BA, ME, women, or whatever. Identity politics is part of our lives, whether you like it or not, which is why it's called politics. You know, anything that is political affects everybody. Okay. Now, if the Tommy Robinsons would have their ethno state, do you really think that you know, British-bred Muslims would want to be deported to a country that they've never been to? I mean, you can see this through the Windrush scandal and how much shit that caused. Identity, anything that's political is a part of everybody's lives, and you know, I'm a socialist, so it includes everybody in society. And to treat everybody fairly with equality is the best way forward, no matter who they are. Okay. Now, so I don't really agree with the premise of your question, but Jeremy Corbyn would never do that because he's been fighting for aspects of pro-equality through all identities for about the last 40 years. So yeah, it's kind of a weird question.
Can I expand a little bit on your answer and the question itself? I think, first of all, it's probably right to say that in theory, it's impossible to get rid of any elements of identity politics entirely from a political party. Like you say, there's always going to be that vein of looking through things. it's one of the many veins that people look through things. People look at things identity-wise, economically-wise, in regards to nations against one another, etc. There are different prisms to look at the political landscape through. I don't think you'd ever be able to get rid of identity politics entirely, but what I would like to see at least is less emphasis on the extremes of identity politics. Have you got to shoot off for a second? I can hold on until you're back if you like.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Cool.
No problem.
I can still hear you. So
shall I carry on talking? In which case, I guess so. Yeah. He says he can still hear me, so I'll carry on. The issue that I have when I'd say identity politics taken to its extremes, or in places that I don't like, on the right. It's very easy for us to point to things like racism, people deliberately discriminating against Muslims, for example, or if you're going to talk about the far right, people being white supremacists or something. Clearly, that in itself is identity politics. You've got people who call themselves identitarians, and it's all about them associating with being a white person and kind of holding that above all other things as their main prism to look through the world. I think that, as an example on the right, is identity politics, the sort of identity politics I'm against. But for the very same reason that I'm against racism through the prism of identity politics, likewise, I'm against what we seem to have on the left nowadays, which is this sort of ever increasing emphasis on, oh, you are a straight white cis male, and therefore you have it really good, and everyone else has it really shit, and you should feel bad about that. Perhaps a slight straw manning, but there are people out there who believe that sort of thing. They do exist, and indeed stuff along the lines of, oh, we are going to have shortlists for our elections where this shortlist will have only BAME people on it, or this shortlist will have only trans people or women on it, or whatever. I don't agree with the concept of all one thing or another shortlisting. I think it's by its very nature discriminatory. I agree with the aim of saying, let's get more people of colour into Parliament, or let's get more women into Parliament. Those are things that I would like to see happen. I think things like shortlists are the wrong way to go about it. It's kind of like what gets proposed in the world of work nowadays, where it's like, well, why not have some kind of a colourblind way of doing it? Why not, have basically a person's age, or their set of qualifications, their history of campaigning within the party, or more importantly, a list of what their views are, and you leave it out. You leave it out playing off of the whole, we're only going to pick out of a bunch of women, or we're only going to pick out of a bunch of this people or another. Both on the side of whether it's a man or a woman, a black person, a white person, etc. Are you back, by the way? Hello.
Yes.
Did you hear all of what I said?
Yeah, I heard everything.
Yeah, I was. If I could just finish my point quickly, then I was just going to say, in my own life, as far as I'm concerned, when I meet people and when I talk to people and when I'm friends with people, I do not view someone in a negative light because of a particular religious or ethnic background or something. If I did, that would be racism. But likewise, I don't think anyone should have any special privileges, or anyone should get a little bit more time of day, or I should shut up and listen to this other person because they're part of this disadvantaged group. I'm like, no, sorry. As far as I see it from a very personal perspective, I think it's right to judge every individual out there on the basis of that individual, not to positively or negatively discriminate on the basis of what group they belong to. And that's my personal view of how I conduct myself in the world, and therefore that is the same position I would endorse politically as well.
Indeed. I'm very much in favour of zero discrimination. So that goes, and that's a door that swings both ways. So when it comes to job interviews, or when it comes to people wanting to rent an apartment, these decisions, if there are some, because there are conscious biases and unconscious biases. If it comes to any kind of bias, then it should be totally blind. And if people meet the criteria for a job or an apartment or whatever, or it should be put across. But there is no way, going back to the premise of the question, there is no way to get away from identity politics as such. So yeah, it's a difficult one. But thank you, Swiss, for that a great response.
Oh, no problem. Hopefully, it explains my position at the very least.
Yeah. Jody, 1987 says, if Corbyn became PM, can he really change things, or will the establishment close ranks and prevent him from making any meaningful changes? We've had this discussion before, Mr. Swiss.
Yes.
We have. Do you remember I said the same thing to you? I asked you the same thing, and you can say the same thing that you said to me.
I can. I'm going to have to try and remember what my response was. I think I probably said
it.
You can mark, you can grade my papers afterwards then, if it's the same thing as I said before. I think what I said last time and what I would say this time is that, of course, yes, there are going to be people out there who are going to make life as difficult as possible for Corbyn to get some of his policies and his vision through. I think to a certain degree, anyone who is elected as a Labour MP who stands on that manifesto at any future election ought to be held, broadly speaking, to have to vote to implement what that manifesto is. But of course, yes, there are going to be plenty of interests out there who are not going to want to see Corbyn put in the full programme that he's got on offer. I think Corbyn will probably fall short of the expectations of everything that he'd like to do. But it's not to say that the change he'll make won't be meaningful. I think he will make some serious improvements to this country for the better. It just might not be the sort of the socialist utopia some people might be hoping for.
Okay.
Is that what I said last time?
Essentially, yeah. Essentially, if you get voted in on a manifesto, then it's your duty to push through that manifesto. And you have to bear in mind that all the MPs were also voted in on that manifesto. So it is their job also as singular MPs to follow through. So the visions we've seen in the Labour Party recently are over, I would say kind of self-manufactured issues. But, that's a whole nother can of worms, and we're not going to go into that tonight. So, yeah, with regards to the PLP, they would have to follow the Corbyn line. With regards to the establishment, it depends what establishment you're looking at. If you're looking at the, I think the fourth establishment, which is the press, a lot of it is losing power anyway, and lots of people looking to alternative sources of media. So I really wouldn't worry about it. If there is going to be a Corbyn government, whether it be this year or 2022 or whenever it is, I think there's going to be a lot of changes. So I really wouldn't worry about it too much. And I think if we get selected on a manifesto, which I think is the bottom line, then the party would have to follow it through. And I think that is the bottom line.
Yeah, I think whatever Corbyn can get into the next manifesto, the bulk of what's in that manifesto will probably see its way into law.
Yeah, indeed. This is from Adam West. What do you think about Trump being impeached over a Russian spy that worked for NRA, Maria Butina? It's kind of out of the scope of this conversation, but as far as I'm concerned, Trump seems to be the Teflon president at the moment, doesn't he? Seems to be the Teflon president. Like nothing seems to stick.
Yeah, I'd be very surprised if we saw him getting impeached. To be honest, not unless it was for anything new. If he goes and does something in the near future that's impeachable, then sure he might do. But as far as all this Russia stuff goes, I don't see it going anywhere. To be honest.
Yeah, if he was going to be impeached, he would have been impeached by now. Like fucking Nixon would have loved the coat of Teflon that coated on. Fucking hell, honestly.
Oh, indeed.
But yeah. Hello, Oliver Foster. Adam West, obviously, always a privilege. Well shafted. We've got any more questions? Oliver Foster, DWP.
There was one. There's one before that actually. Let's say that zero discrimination is impossible. How do we arrange society to deal with that? That's an interesting question.
I didn't see that because I did ask for them to at me so I could see the questions.
All right.
So that'll be why I didn't see it. Who was that from?
Oliver Foster.
Ah, right. Okay. Completely blind. So I've as an employee and an employer and an interviewer and an interviewee, I've been trying to work this out, and it's a very complicated issue. What you don't do, you don't do what the fucking BBC did and say this position is not open to white people. That is obviously the completely fucking wrong way to do it. And they've got a duty to hold higher standards to do something like that, because at the end of the day, that is discrimination.
And I don't think it will do. And I don't think that sort of thing does any good to win round people on the other side as well.
Exactly right. This is going back to the Monroe thing. Is that, you know, if you're white, you're automatically racist. And you know, Jonathan Pye did a good thing with Owen Jones. I always get Owen Jones and Owen Smith mixed up. Macaulay Culkin writes for The Guardian. So it's Owen Jones, right?
It is, yes, Owen Jones.
Yes, Owen Jones. He did a good thing, and I actually just downloaded his new stage show. It cost me £7.50. It's really good, worth a watch. By the way, I recommend it. And now, if the moment you start off and you say, well, you're white and you're racist, if you start the discussion off with those points, then you're automatically locking horns. Now, that's no way to start a talk or a debate or a negotiation or whatever. So I've been thinking when it comes to, like, if you're talking about job interviews, then obviously there are all sorts of biases. There are age bias, there are sex bias, there are color bias, there are sexuality biases. You know, all these biases you have to take into account. So the only thing I can think of is that they go through some kind of body. I don't know what it is. I mean, maybe a large employee company, let's take Tesco's, for instance, that they must have like the applications must go through I don't know, a human resources department or something, and then they delete the names, they delete the age, there's no photo, and they're just given a number. And then they look through the CVs, they do like a phone interview, and then based on that, there's employment. It's not foolproof, I know, but you know, it's all I've got at the moment. I'm still working on it, but I wonder what you think, Swiss.
Well, I was going to say that, you know, going back to the original question, to say that zero discrimination is impossible, I'd agree with that being the case, because for us to live in a world with zero discrimination, then that would have to therefore be a world where no one was ever sexist, no one was ever racist, no one was ever this, that, or the other, you know, and that in itself is just simply never going to happen. I don't think, I think that you can have gradual cultural shifts, and I think that you can change the zeitgeist over time as well. But I don't think it's possible to completely reprogram, you know, every human mind to eliminate certain attributes of the ways that people are going to be. I think as far as tackling discrimination, well, we've got laws in place at the moment that, you know, say if I say if I walked down the street and started, I'm not deliberately picking an anti-Semitic example in relation to anything recent, it's just the first one that came to mind, but, you know, say if I walk down the street and there's some you know, a Jewish person, a rabbi or something, and I start hurling lots of abuse at him and say to him that he's responsible for all the ills that Israel are committing, and that I've always found you to be very untrustworthy on the basis of your religion, and, you know, all sorts of things like that, then, well, there are laws in place against that at present already. You know, that's clearly harassment, for one thing, at the very least. So I think that for the most egregious things out there that anyone can do to another person on purely the basis of a group that they belong to, we have a legal framework in place already to protect them from that. So then the question is, okay, well, if we've got the legal framework already, then what do you do in terms of trying to change the public mindset towards things? That's probably the more important question in a sense. Of course, there's this other aspect of people in places of employment, and like both of us have said already, sort of trying to have sort of a blind recruitment is one way that you can at least try and improve things in that department. I think without having to rely on positive discrimination rather than to tackle negative discrimination, if you get me. As far as trying to introduce,
you have quotas as well, and then that all ends up fucking messy as well. If you have quota systems, you know, you're looking at so like the STEM fields, for instance, you know, science, technology, engineering, mathematics. So they're saying, oh, why don't we have, you know, equal representation with men and women in the STEM fields? Well, the problem is the women generally just don't study science, technology, engineering, mathematics. It's getting better now. You know, women are starting to get into, you know, engineering. Women are starting to get into mathematics and technology and stuff. It's much better than what it was, say, 10 years ago. But if you want someone, you know, with a doctorate in engineering now, that's a woman. You got a position, and you've got like you've got one position to be filled. They need to have this set of qualifications. One of them may be a doctorate in engineering, and you've got 100 men apply and like 3 women. You know, so that's a 3% application rate. Because you've got a quota to fill, you have to employ a woman, and it doesn't matter. So you've got a choice of 3 women out of, you know, 103 people, just because you've got a quota to fill. And this is negative aspect. This is you know, so is it the best person to fill the position, or is it just because you've got a quota to fill? So again, it's the positive discrimination thing again.
Yeah.
But it also looks towards, why aren't women going into STEM fields? You know?
Well, this one thing I just wanted to mention before we go on anymore. I think you've still got me as presenting to everybody, so it's still got my icon right in the middle for the full time at the moment. I don't know if I can. Oh no, hang on a minute. I think I might have sorted that. There we are. Just so people can see your lovely channel logo as you're speaking. It's interesting you mentioned the STEM subjects, because actually my girlfriend Baroness Swiss works within a STEM field. She's like an IT specialist. She did a course at university. When I was doing video games design, she was doing digital forensics, and she works for a private company that the government contracts to deal with legal aspects, court cases and stuff like that. They kind of handle the data, so to speak. She had to sign a sort of a non-disclosure thing for some of the things that she handles, so she isn't actually able to tell me everything that she does in her job, because some of it's sensitive to material that she handles, sort of to do with ongoing court cases, etc. But what she said to me, obviously, you know, being a woman, being a minority within that particular field she works in as well. Now, this is only Baroness Swiss's own perspective. I'm not attempting to speak for anyone else here.
Sure.
But as far as from what she said to me, she finds it incredibly condescending when people at work go, oh, isn't it fantastic that you're a woman in a STEM subject? Oh, we don't get many of you doing STEM. Oh, you know, it's great. Maybe not in the patronizing voice I'm putting on, but, you know, when they go, oh, you know, isn't it great? Oh, it must have been difficult to, you know, be one of the only people doing it. And for her perspective, she's just like, no, just treat me like a person. You know, I chose to do the subject. It's a subject that I'm good at. I'm turning up to work. I'm good at my job. You know, don't treat me as a special case because I've managed to make it into this particular field. You know? So I think that go on. Sorry.
Carry on. Finish your point. I've got something to add to this.
Sure. So I was simply going to say, I think that where this issue needs to be addressed is not at the output end, but it's at the input end. It's not of saying, you know, oh, we've got this percentage of people in this particular field of work and that percentage of people in that particular field of work, because there's a spread. You know, there are some jobs out there that have far more men in them. There are some jobs out there that have far more women in them. So the two questions that I would ask, the two most important questions is, A, if somebody wants to make it into a certain professional field, are they able to, regardless of gender or background? So, i.e., you know, if they want to go to university and study a certain subject, are they able to? Are they free to do so? You know, can they go on the government website and say, yes, I'd like to apply for student finance for this subject or that subject? The other question is, well, what are the preferences of people out there? And are there reasons for those preferences as well? You know, as far as getting more women into STEM subjects go, is there more we can do to get more women into STEM? Are they put off for certain reasons? And if they are put off, what are the things we can do about it? If they are put off, what are the things we can do about it? But also ask the question, well, maybe there's just a natural difference there. Maybe just as a tendency, women are more interested in slightly different career paths than men might be within certain subjects. That is also a possibility in itself.
Well, yeah, I mean, just a little aside, just from what you just mentioned. One of the things that I thought was quite interesting is that if you look at toys that are engineered between boys and girls, like over, well, even as late as up to 2010, even into the tens, you'd find that certain Lego sets were engineered towards boys, i.e. packaged in blue. And when you saw the like in the 70s and 80s, it was Meccano chemistry sets, and it was always boys playing with them, you know. But when it comes to girls stuff, it was always, you know, Barbie, Cindy, fashion, makeup, that kind of shit. And it was always, you know, gender designed or gender tagged and gender sold. So, and I think that has something to do with it. But moving on from that, there's someone very close to me that's who's a woman that's just got a job in a new engineering company, and she works in a administration role, but also quality control. So she does a lot of quality control when products leave the factory. Now, this has been the first place where there's wage neutrality that she's ever worked. And she was very pissed off today because it's gender neutral with regards to pay. It also means it's gender neutral when it comes to the workload. So today they had to clean the factory. So she was expected to roll up her sleeves, get down and dirty, sweep the floor, carry wood and lengths of metal from one end of the factory to the other end of the factory. And it's the first time that she'd ever been subjected to this. And it's just like, you know, this is how equality works. She said that, you know, it's been her first experience. She enjoyed it, but it was just like, you know, I feel so dirty and grimy and stuff. Obviously, the all those complaints came out, but she found it quite interesting in working in a gender neutral place. There was no patronization. It was just like, look, you know, if you're gonna, this is equality in action. You know, which I thought was quite interesting, being today her first experience, and for you to talk about that. There was no condescendingness about it, because normally she would just be asked to, hey, you know, just put on the kettle and while we do the work, you know, you just keep the tea flowing, you know. Whereas now she's expected to actually chip in with the cleaning and the moving of rubble and what have you, which I thought was quite interesting.
It's and ideally that's what things ought to be like. shouldn't it? In any workplace, for that matter, not to go, you know, oh, you're a woman in a so-called man's job, or you're a man in a so-called woman's job. You know, like you know, the whole stigma. Well, there's probably not as much of a stigma nowadays, but there used to be to some degree of like male nurses. You know, it'd be like, oh, you're a man and you're a nurse, but isn't a nurse a woman's job? And it's just like, no, fuck off. Just let people do whatever jobs they want. Deal with it. You know, don't make a big hoo-ha about it one way or the other. As far as I see it, at least.
Yeah, exactly right. So, again from Oliver Foster. A lot of questions here from Oliver Foster. So, how about you're a recognised majority candidate? This is a role you is for any. Is this the one that you did before? Okay.
No, this is a new one, I think.
Okay. How about you're a recognised majority candidate? This role is for any capable minority candidate. The point is that if you're trying to redress the imbalance, you can't carry on picking randomly. No, true, you can't carry on picking randomly. But the point being is that ideally you want the best person for the job, no matter what ability, what physical ability they have, whatever sex they are, whatever race they are, whatever religion they have, you know, whatever, even, you know, whatever hobbies they have, you know. Say for instance, if you're running a shop and you've got a close-knit group and all of you are sports fans, and some guy puts on his CV, what's your major hobby? I really enjoy playing League of Legends competitively. Again, that's a sign of bias, whereas everybody else enjoys playing football. You know, they're going to say, oh yeah, we don't want this guy coming because he's a geek, obviously, and we're all jocks. You know, again, there's that sign of bias. So it is very difficult. But this whole blind testing thing is that you end up having the best person for the job without having these biases come out. How does one and is there anything you want to add to that before I move on?
I perhaps no, that's fine. I perhaps didn't quite understand the premise of the question. How about you're a recognised majority candidate and the role is for any capable minority candidate? The point is, if you're trying to redress imbalance, you can't carry on picking randomly. I'm assuming then this is sort of saying, I don't know, that you're applying for a job and you're a white person, but the job is available to anyone of any skin color or something along those lines. Well, is that roughly again,
well, okay, so maybe the premise is the question is you're trying to refill a quota, then the quota shouldn't exist in the first place.
Oh, yes. Yeah, that's what I'd say. Because I'd say that, okay, look, you can have one dimension of looking at it. You could go, okay, we don't have that many minority ethnic people, but we've got too many white people in a certain role. Okay. But then within the same workplace, you might go, okay, well, we don't have enough women here, but we've got a lot of men here. Okay. So then that's two dynamics to be looking at it through. But then if you look at, say, age discrimination, you go, well, we don't have many older people working here. It's all young people, because older people, I mean, my dad has told me before that, you know, older people can be discriminated against in hiring. But so then that's a third dimension to look for. Now, you know, I'm not attempting to say that sooner or later you will get a shortlist that says, oh, we can only hire ethnic minority women over the age of 50 or something, because that would get to a slightly ridiculous point. But what I'd say in terms of shortlisting and saying, oh, we'd ideally want to hire this person over that person or whatever, obviously, when you're looking at the differences between categories of groups and demographics of groups in the whole, then you'd go, yes, of course, you know, that will ultimately get you more of X type of person in this role or more of Y type of person in this role. Or in the bigger picture, you'd go, okay, maybe that is fairer. But as far as any individual job goes, that you are still discriminating against a certain type of person. You might be trying to combat discrimination against an existing person who apparently isn't represented enough, but then in terms of trying to do that, you know, that's not going to make someone who doesn't reach the criteria feel any better. If they want to go for a certain job and they go, oh, sorry, mate, but you know, you're 48 and we're only hiring over 50s because we don't have enough older people. you know, sorry, pal, you'll have to look around for something else. Because I think that when those circumstances are applied to any individual case, straight away it then reeks of discrimination once again. There have to be better ways of going about it than to combat negative discrimination with positive discrimination, because at the end of the day, they're both still creating discrimination.
And quota systems are just bullshit. Which is my final on that one. How does one redress institutional bias without pissing some people off? You're going to piss people off.
Yeah.
It's just
of course, yeah, you will piss people off.
There are also some fields where having specific minorities can have a big impact on social good. Female washing machine engineers and doctors in majority first generation Muslim neighborhoods, as an example. Do you understand that so much?
Oh, am I still on mute? No, I'm not. I'm back on. Female washing machine engineers and doctors in majority first generation Muslim neighborhoods, as an example. I mean, I'm guessing that Oliver Foster's trying to say that, you know, it's a positive that people can break the mold of what the expectations of what certain people, you know, what you'd expect certain people to do from certain fields. I'm assuming that that's what the case is. And to that, I'd say, well, you know, yeah, from sort of, you know, from a perspective of going, oh, well, it's refreshing that you've got a person from a background that you wouldn't expect to be doing this kind of a job, sure. And it certainly shows that, you know, that shouldn't be any hamper to someone being able to do that job. But once more, I wouldn't, you know, I don't see it as suddenly, I don't see it as inherently good or positive thing in itself, the gender or the sex or the minority background or the majority background for that matter, or the religion or the age of any particular person, any particular job. Like I'm not looking to celebrate those aspects in a person's employment. I'm looking to say, are they competent in their job? Are they good at what they do? And regardless of the color of their skin or anything else, you know, that's what I care about. Yeah.
I think it's only a matter of time until it become normality, where we won't even look at you know, the color of the skin or the sex or whatever. You know, it's only a matter of time before we get a female Elon Musk, for instance. It's only a matter of time before we get a female Jordan Kane, for instance. Jordan Kane, sorry.
Can I read a follow-up comment we had from Oliver Foster, because it ties into what he just said a moment ago.
Yeah, sure.
And we've got others from another from Well Shafted as well, just so he doesn't think we're ignoring him. But Oliver Foster's follow-up to what we just said was a lot of women from those minorities are stay-at-home and the men go to work. They don't want a man visiting the house without the husband being there. I'd argue, though, that if we're associating that with a person from a certain minority background, I'd say that in itself is a cultural thing.
Yeah, it's a Western thing.
Minority, that minority might have brought from elsewhere. That, like, I'd say that in this country, at least, like ever since the 1950s onwards, we've had a gradual move towards the acceptance of women in the workplace, women not having to be housewives, and that is the way that our overall direction and culture has moved. And go on, carry on. And I was just going to say that, you know, if it is the case that within minority backgrounds that is still not the accepted norm, and that is, you know, it's still seen as, oh no, a woman should be staying in the house and a man should be going out to work and she shouldn't be allowed to go out and have a job, then I'd say, well, that is obviously the wrong attitude to take. But the way that I'd encourage that is just by trying to say, well, you know, look, that this is the overriding way that we treat one another in this country anyway, that we do treat men and women as equals that ought to have the same opportunities as one another. So again, I'd say that I don't know whether the solution to that is to then say, okay, well, you need a quota of 30% or 40% Pakistani women going into this, that, or the other field to encourage the rest of them to get jobs. I'd say that the cultural influence ought to come first. It ought to be making it clear to everyone that anyone who wants to go out and work should be allowed to go out and work, regardless of what their background is. And that would have to be influenced, well, Well, I'd say through probably the school systems. You know, in schools already, they already have the doctrine of, you know, anti-racism, anti-sexism, etc., where they say, do not treat people differently. You can reach your goals if you want them. We have, you know, as much as I don't agree with the student finance system, you know, we have student loans for people who want to go to university to study a certain thing. As far as the laws in this country go, we are offering those opportunities to people. It's about encouraging any pockets of society that haven't caught up with that yet to say, and you should be giving your children those same opportunities in kind.
Also, what I would like to add is, obviously, I believe that Oliver Foster was referencing people that are maybe first or second generation people coming from Muslim backgrounds or Islamist backgrounds, or places where generally in the home countries such as Saudi Arabia or you know, the Persian places where, you know, women's rights generally aren't there. But where generally, if they came over in, you know, the 50s or 60s, you're looking at now second generation, which have now grown up quite westernized. So they tend to be quite secular, you know. So that's one side of it, you know. So that the hijab, for instance, is not essential wear. Women can go out to work. But obviously, there's another side of it. Over the last 8 years, is that we've had 8 years of austerity. You know, so it's again become essential that both parents go out there and work. You know? If it doesn't matter what religion you're from, if you're from a working class background, now it's both parents need to go out to work just to earn a crust. So it depends what socioeconomic situation you're from. And it depends on the secular background, I think. So background and economics really come into it more than we'd like to say.
If I can just add one point to what you said there quickly.
Yeah.
I completely agree that one of the real flaws that we have with our society today is that you can, in theory, still have two parents working, and they might only just be scraping enough to be able to support the family, which is not the case that we saw in relation to people's wages 40 or 50 years back.
Yeah.
Back then, you could have one person in the family earning the wage, and then that was all that needed to be done. I would like to see us in a position at some point in the future where you can afford to run a household off of one person having a job once more. And then whomever it may be, a man or a woman, I'm not really fussed. In fact, actually, when I was growing up, my dad was the stay-at-home dad. It was my mum who went to work out in the city of London, and my dad looked after me and my brothers before they got divorced.
I think the point is having a stay-at-home parent is quite important.
Yes, yeah, exactly. Enabling the ability for there to be a stay-at-home parent. I'm not fussed about which gender, but I think for the sake of the children, for the family, that would be a good thing. For the kids to be able to bond with at least mum or dad for the vast majority of the day, you know, from early years, and then obviously they're out of school for most of the day anyway, so it doesn't matter quite as much then. But I think that's the ideal situation.
Yeah. Well, essentially, this is the thing, and again, when he talks about there was a certain point with regards to BAME or second generation immigrants. I think it's pissing people off. That's it. How does one redress institutional bias without pissing some people off? Yeah, it's not going to happen, but it's only going to be a matter of time, because generally, again, I'm going to be a bit ageist here. It generally only the older people, or i.e. the small C conservatives, that tend to be pissed off anyway. So yeah, moving on. What do you guys think of people looking for work after dismissal? Yeah, of course. Yeah, it depends what the dismissal is for. What really worries me is people looking for work after coming out of prison. Because the way the work market is at the moment is you're fucked, even if you're okay, right? I'm going to take all biases in account, right? And assume that the employer is the most, because at the moment it's an employer's market, okay? What with the zeros contracts and everything else. So I've got a job, right? And it offers full-time, okay, with decent holiday, 3 weeks a year, with holiday pay, and it's only 45 hours a week, right? And this could be a retail job, it could be anything you want, right? So I've got this job now, right? Now, am I going to take someone straight out of prison? Nah. Am I going to take someone that's just been dismissed from their last job? So that means I don't get a reference. Probably not. Am I going to take someone without any experience? Full stop. Probably not. So that excludes all your people straight out of university. Am I going to take someone that's that I don't like the look of? Okay, so this is when my internal biases come in. Whether this person is a chav, okay, which are generally poor white people, whether it be someone who I think is a gangster in my head, which could be, you know, a Latino person or a black person or someone that that's not from my neck of the woods, you know. So, you know, it really narrows things down, you know. So dismissal is not the only thing I'd be looking at when you want to even out the job market. It would be looking to having a decent, like addressing government policy when it comes to rehabilitating people straight out of prison. It comes to actually not workfare. Workfare was a fucking shit show. But actual training programs and youth centers that offer, you know, paid work experience, getting rid of unpaid internships and getting people paid. Like here's an example, right? Let me give you a great example. Okay. So when I came out of university, I was a fully qualified photographer, right? And all I wanted to do was take photos, right? But I always had that teacher thing inside of me. So like what I wanted to do is pass on what I learned, right? Now, if there was a government program for me to teach, you know, disadvantaged kids or, I don't know, people straight out of prison, how to take photos and how to appreciate art, I would have been well up for it. I'd have been all over that shit. All I needed was a basic income, you know, it's just so I can afford a place to live, my food, you know, replace my clothes and maybe go out 2-3 times a month. That's all I would have needed. And as long as I got to take photos with people and, you know, look at art and shit like that on a full-time basis, that would have been it, you know. And that's what I think the kind of programs that, with regards to people that have no direction or just coming out of prison or have no experience, that's what I think that the government should be looking at. But that's my own personal idea on the kind of programs that they should be looking at.
If I can sort of try to address that as well, I'm probably not sure in myself whether I have any good answers to it, to be honest. Both kind of addressing both dismissal and people who've come out of prison, to sort of take them both on, because I think that when an employer, I mean, and I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of an employer here. I'm trying to imagine, okay, you know, say Captain Switzerland takes off the ground and I eventually get myself an office somewhere, a proper little studio set for doing things, and I hire 3 or 4 people or something, to help with social media promotion, cameraman or woman, or anything along those lines. What would I be looking for when it comes
to say camera person?
Oh, sorry, yes, a camera person. Justin Trudeau will be happy. But what would I be looking for in who I'm hiring? And probably one answer would be, well, qualifications. If I'm looking to hire a person handy behind the camera, I'd like to know if they've worked in any previous jobs or if they've studied film studies or something along those lines at university or things along those lines. And obviously, to a degree, that is discrimination, because it's discriminating a person who is qualified for the job versus someone who isn't. But it's based on a degree of competence. It's based on how good you think they'd be at the job. Likewise, I think, now this is where it gets a bit more difficult. Say if someone's been dismissed from a previous job, or if they've just got out of prison. If someone's been dismissed from a previous job, then I'd say, well, it really entirely depends on the circumstances of why they've been dismissed, doesn't it? And it's hard to answer otherwise. It might have been a fair dismissal. It might have been an unfair dismissal. And do I think the grounds for why they were dismissed will affect the reason that I'm looking to hire the person for this job? It could be 2 completely unrelated incidents, or it could be something that would affect it. And it would matter. Obviously, if a person came to work for me and I found out that they'd committed arson at the last place they'd worked and been in prison for 5 years and then got out, I might go, fair dues that you've been reformed and paid your debt to society, but maybe I might want to hire somebody else. Would that be fair dues? I'd probably feel it would be fair dues. It might feel a little bit harsh, but that's probably the personal decision that I'd make. I've probably only got a fluffy answer to it then, which is basically just it depends on the circumstances. The person who's dismissed, the person out of prison, what have they done? That'd be the question. What have they done? I wouldn't be against a person who had done time or had been dismissed purely because of that, but it would depend on the circumstances.
Okay. The thing is, when someone is dismissed, right? It cannot be disclosed, as far as I understand, employee law, right? So you go for a job and you list your you fill out the application form and you fill out your last job, and it's up to your potential employers to then call your last employers to ask for a reference. Now, it is illegal for them to give you a bad reference, okay, because it's defamation of character. So what generally happens, again, I'd like to be corrected on the side chat, is that what they would generally do is they will refuse a reference. Okay, so then in the interview stage, you'd say, why did your last employers refuse your reference? And it's down to you to disclose why. That's as far as I understand it.
I've actually been on the other side of this with my new job that I'm starting. Obviously, this was the case of somebody looking to hire me. And in the incredibly long, drawn-out process, which I've really enjoyed for the last few months of getting this job, some of the things they were asking me, obviously, they wanted previous references. They also wanted my employment history as well. So from the period of when I left school up until present, when was I in education? When was I employed? When was I unemployed? For what reasons was I unemployed? For what reason had I left previous jobs? But what you were saying about the references, I noticed that when I was trying to get a reference from I used to work at I could probably say it, there's no harm in it. I used to work at a W.H. Smith's a few years back, just as a Saturday job. And what they'd said apparently is, with some new laws that have come in, all they're allowed to do at this point is just confirm that I works there. They're not allowed to say anything about me, either positive or negative at this point. They can just go, yes, Mr. Switzerland, he worked here from 2011 until 2013 or whatever, and that's about it, really. That's kind of that's what I've noticed on my end of things recently, at least.
Yeah,
well, I don't know. I don't know if that was a point I was making there. I just thought I'd add in that little experience.
It makes sense. And so, what I really want right now is I want a question from Matt Hancock. If you want to ask Mr. Swiss here why he left the Labour Party, or if you have any other questions with regards to what we spoke to tonight. I'm trying to get us back on point because I really want this to end soon, because like we're hitting 3 hours now.
That's fine. I was going to say I'm probably going to have to shoot in about half an hour or so to get dinner on the go.
So yeah, we've got a time limit then. But I to be honest, I'm a bit fucked. So because it's been quite intense questioning. Okay, so we've had a few questions. Has there been any other questions that have struck you?
What, any others that we spotted in the side chat, you mean?
Yeah.
A slightly fun one here. A question for you: what is worse, Theresa May or Tony Blair?
Theresa May. Definitely. Hang on. Let me qualify that. I feel that if you can say, like, one of the biggest crimes that Tony Blair did was go to war illegally in Iraq. Okay. Now, I kind of understand that he felt he had to do it. I felt he was politically obliged to do it. Now, if you look at Theresa May and her actual politics, her actual ideologies, I think she's actually evil. Like, she's an evil human being, and she has she's what I call a classic big C conservative and a small C conservative, right? Now, quite similar to Jacob's Remark in
Jacob's
Tree Frogs, yeah, in ideological circumstance, right? In the way that she's quite willing to recently, over Brexit, sacrifice the people in the EU, i.e. British citizens, and the EU citizens in the UK, because they are just a mere bargaining chip. The whole Windrush scandal is just bullshit, and it comes from her stand as Home Secretary, right? Also, this is another thing, because she's obviously hybrid, right? So,
right. I've got a really short answer in contrast to this one.
Also, now the thing that you must understand about conservatives, and again, this is something that really pisses me off about Tories, is they resent the Labour Party just because they are working class and they have the right to vote, right? As far as they are concerned, you, me, anybody that's not a Tory or a Lord or aristocrat or whatever does not deserve to vote. They resent it, and they will use their entire power to take that away from you. This is what pisses me off about Theresa May and Jacob's Tree Frogs and Boris Johnson. David Cameron, not so much. That's another discussion. David Cameron's another discussion, because he's a very complex human being. But the others, yeah. This is what pisses me off about the Tories.
I'll offer you my answer to the question if you like. Then
yes, go. I'm pretty much done. Go for it.
I would say which one is worse? I think the question was Tony Blair or Theresa May.
Yes.
I would say Blair. However, I would qualify that by saying that objectively, I think Blair is worse because Blair has more blood on his hands than Theresa May does. Blair's decisions, in my opinion at least, have led to the involvement of Britain in ending far more lives than Theresa May has. So, all right, go on.
Let me jump in.
Go on.
But I feel that Tony Blair was painted into a political corner, right? and I don't think had the president of the United States at the time painted him into that corner. George Bush Senior. There we go. No, Junior. George Bush. Yeah. Had George W. Bush Jr. not painted him into that corner, I don't think he would have done it.
I think that Blair painted himself into that corner. In my opinion,
yeah.
When he sort of said to Bush, you know, we're going to be there with you, whatever you need. You want to go into Iraq, we'll go into Iraq as well.
When he was giving George Bush a hand job, yeah, probably. You know,
yeah. I mean, I can agree with you to the point that, you know, obviously for him to, you know, put his foot down and say, no, Bush, I'm not going into Iraq. The intelligence is faulty. We're not going to put British troops at risk. We're not going to put civilian lives in Iraq at risk or whatever. I understand for him to do that, it would have probably like massively weakened the special relationship at the time. And he probably would have got equal amounts of criticism for not doing it. But nonetheless, from a moral point of view, I think it was fairly clear that he shouldn't have done it. And that weighs very heavily with me still. I just wanted to add one more point, which is that although I think Blair is the worst person, I also think that Theresa May is the worst prime minister. Blair, for his many ills, was actually a fairly competent leader of the country, whereas Theresa May appears to be anything but.
Okay. Again, this is where I disagree with you. I think the ethics behind each of the people, I think Theresa May's ethics are completely rotten, and they're bound in class and aristocracy, whereas I think Blair was just a fucking lapdog, and he was just a whipping boy for Blair Jr. Oh God! It was just for Bush Jr. Okay, so we've got so that's essentially what I think, and that's kind of a weird difference that we have. So
it is, but we understand the differences at the very least. We've etched out why. I just want to draw your attention. We've had a load of questions when you ask people for questions pertaining to the title of the video. We've had a big influx of them since we started talking about Blair and May.
Okay.
Have you found them? They're just underneath.
Okay.
Where you typed your comment a moment ago.
Okay. Swiss.
Yes.
Who would be your ideal leader after Absolute Boy Corbyn? Obviously from Mr. James Fielding.
Who would be my ideal leader after the Absolute Boy Corbyn? I don't know.
This is a great question. I do like this question.
Yeah, I mean, I've said in the past that I think Emily Thornberry would make an appropriate successor to Corbyn, but not because I'm like wild on Emily Thornberry, just because, you know, she seems to be broadly on board with most of the Corbyn agenda. She's been a fairly loyal shadow minister, and she's not shit at PMQs. So it's kind of a pragmatic choice there. It's not really an ideal choice. Who would be my ideal leader after the Absolute Boy Corbyn? Honestly, I can't tell you. And perhaps that's one of the things that factored into me leaving Labour, because I kind of thought, what is the future for post-Corbyn Labour? And I think, I'm not sure. I'm not sure if I can pick someone that sort of energizes me the same way that Corbyn did. So I'm really not sure. I'm not sure if I've got a horse in that race. There's a few people that I like a bit. You know, I like Barry Gardner. There are things about him I don't like, but Barry Gardner's quite a character.
He was great in the last chicken coup, and he was great in the election. Barry Gardner rocks, and he's got a certain tree frog's flair to him.
Yeah. So I'd say I think Emily Thornberry's probably like the pragmatic choice, but I don't really have a clear favourite for me personally.
Laura Pidcock really strikes me, but she's still young. Same as Long Bailey, still young. They've got a lot to learn on the front bench, and they will learn it over the next 5 years. But I think by the time the next election comes around, well, By the time the election, after the next election comes around, because obviously it's going to be this year, mate.
We'll see. We'll see.
Long Bailey and Laura Pidcock. It's about time we had a female leader, and these are both strong leaders in their field. So keep an eye on those.
Those would be your picks.
Those would be my picks.
We've got. I think we skipped over a couple when we got to the James Field.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you found them.
Yeah, sure. Cameron Hickman had asked, "Are you going to join the SDP or vote for them in the future?"
Ooh,
and then followed.
This is something I missed in my notes actually about the. You said that you flirted with the idea of joining the SDP.
Yeah. I flirted with the idea. I've been following them on Twitter for a little while, and in the last couple of weeks, I have taken a couple of journeys over to the old SDP website just to refresh myself on their policies and their manifesto and the rest of it. But ultimately, I kind of decided, well, I'm leaving one party which I don't feel entirely in line with. To join another party that I don't feel entirely in line with, and at that, a much smaller party with really no presence on the electoral landscape at the moment as well. So that's what. But basically, as I said, I kind of sit on the non-neoliberal right of the Labour Party. But then again, I'd probably easily sit on the very far left of the SDP were I to join them. So it wouldn't be a perfect match. So I had considered it, and there are things about the SDP I like which Labour aren't offering. But likewise, the inverse is true. There's plenty that Labour's offering that the SDP aren't. So no, I've got no plans to join the SDP anytime soon.
Thank God for that. Next question. You said there was another one.
Cameron Hickman had just followed up from that and also said you did suggest that you might in the future, I think, with the previous question. But Oliver Foster asks a challenging one. Says, Swiss, if Corbyn is the predominant social left movement, what is to be gained from leaving? Question. Yeah, basically to say, I guess, if Corbyn is the only game in town at the moment, then why bother leaving the Labour Party? You're not going to find anything better.
We did touch on this earlier, didn't we? We did.
Yeah, I mean, as far as what is to be gained from leaving, it's a personal gain on my part rather than a gain politically for the country one way or another. Like me being a member or a affiliated supporter of the Labour Party is not going to have any particular impact on the success of the Labour Party. I'm but one of 600,000 members, or I was at least. For me, it's a personal decision. What is to be gained from leaving is that I feel that I'm slightly more independent as a voter once more. I feel that not being a member of the Labour Party or any party for that matter probably better suits my views of the political landscape than being a member of Labour. Not to mention an extra £24 in my pocket each year. So hey ho, bit of the old financial self-interest as well. That's probably the best I can give you there, Oliver.
Okay. Anything else I missed?
James Field, we did James Fielding's. Matt Hancock said, Captain, are you going to reconsider joining #Team Hancock? Your friend and colleague Angel agreed to yesterday. I'm sorry, Matt Hancock, but the answer's still no. I'm not going to be joining #Team Hancock anytime soon, but I appreciate the perseverance.
Despite the amount of Wi-Fi and fun you may offer through your
Indeed.
One from Angels. How would you feel with Sexy Clive as leader? I've got an answer to this one as well.
How would you feel with Sexy Clive as leader?
Yeah, Clive Lewis, I assume.
I think he'd be an all right leader. I'd certainly prefer him to, your Chukwuramunas or whoever.
Yeah, he's definitely better. He's acres to the left of Chukwuramuna. I've never fucking been on the bus on my life, Chukwuramuna. Clive Lewis. He's got one sticking point with me, is he's pro-Trident. That's the only thing that pisses me off. He's incredibly good looking, as Angels has said. He's incredibly charismatic. He is a future leader, but he needs to get over his horn for nuclear weapons. In my eyes,
I'd say this
in nuclear weapons. There's no.
I'd say this one thing to that though, that as far as the effects it would have on Labour Party policy, Corbyn is obviously staunchly anti-Trident, and he still hasn't been able to win the Parliamentary Labour Party round to opposing nuclear weapons anyway.
It was still in the manifesto in 2017. That tells you something, doesn't it? It really does.
Wasn't it in the manifesto to review Trident rather than to scrap it?
It was in the manifesto to back Trident, as far as I know.
Yes.
Review.
No, sorry. I think you're right there. Yeah. Well, yeah, but that's what I'd say.
That was Clive Lewis. I think that was Clive Lewis, because he was supposed to be Shadow Defence Secretary, wasn't he?
That's right. Yeah.
And didn't he get sacked from that role?
He either got sacked or he quit. I can't remember, but there was this whole thing about like a Labour Party conference or something. He was supposed to be giving a speech about Trident or something similar, and then allegedly at the last minute, what he was supposed to say was changed, and apparently he was quite displeased with it. But I've heard competing versions of events there, so I'm not exactly sure what went on with it.
Yeah, me too. But yeah, Angels. My answer to your question is I would like him to be the next leader of the Labour Party. Obviously, I think Laura Pidcock and Long Bailey, I think they are better contenders right now, just because they don't have the same kind of lust for nuclear weapons as Clive Lewis, and that for me, and I suppose Jeremy Corbyn by extension, and maybe you, I'm not sure what your thoughts are on Trident and nuclear weapons are, but 200 billion over the next 5 years is a shit ton of R&D, and it's a shit ton of jobs, not just that we'll lose through not renewing Trident. So.
Well, I think we've spoken about this before, haven't we? Trident. My view is basically, I think it's so much money being spent that we could spend better in other places. But as far as I see it, I don't. You know how we were talking about vote losers the other day? I think the public at large still quite broadly support keeping Trident. So I think Labour would probably struggle if scrapping Trident was in the manifesto, because that would probably be a sticking point for some people at least. Even though my personal preference is to get rid of nukes, I recognise that there's not really a public appetite for it. Like, further strides need to be made in terms of the public debate on it before I think we're going to muster enough support for an actual policy to get rid of them. We've got one from Jack James here. Another question I spotted. If you are you done on Trident, by the way? I didn't want to cut you off there.
No. I've made my point. I mean, it's a point that's been made many times before. So to Swiss, now that you have left the Labour Party because of not wanting to be affiliated with the party, does that mean you rule out joining any party in a near distant future? Well, we've already discussed your flirtations with the SDP. And you're definitely not going back to the Greens, obviously, with their Remain stance. So
no.
Is there anything left for you?
Right. I'll give you my answer. But before I give you my answer, there's one important thing that I need to say, which is that it was on your Sunday stream that you hosted, actually. Yeah. If you remember, in the side chat, I'd said that if David Davis becomes Prime Minister, I will join the Lib Dems as a bit of a, that's never going to happen. Kind of a thing.
I do remember. Actually.
Yeah. Now, not to be accused of a sort of a Paddy Ashdown character of saying that he's going to eat his hat and then producing no hat of which he didn't eat. To stay true to my word, were David Davis to become Prime Minister, I would indeed join the Liberal Democrats because it's something I said I'd do, even though it was a joke. nonetheless, why not? I'll follow through with it. But that in itself is both an exception to everything else, and it's not down to any kind of a preference for the Lib Dems on my part. It's purely to keep my word on that joke. As for the broader question, does that mean you rule out joining any party in the near future, stroke distant future? I do rule out joining any parties in the near future. I've genuinely got no intentions to do so. Despite flirting with the SDP, I've come to the conclusion that they, much like everybody else, there's no one that I really want to pin my colours to at the moment. As far as the distant future, no, I could probably never rule out in the distant future. You know, I'm hoping to live a long and happy life, maybe into my 70s or something along those lines. The idea of ruling out me never joining another party in my entire life is just, you know, that's kind of a promise that's just itching to be broken, really. But no, for the time being, at least, for, you know, between now and the next election, or even beyond that, as I say, I've got no plans to, I've got no inclinations to. I don't see why I would.
Okay, so I've got an offer from Oliver Foster. He says that he'll pay for your Labour membership. He thinks it's important for us all to feel that our voice matters, that our contribution is important, and that we are supporting one another to build a future needed. And I suppose this kind of echoes my feeling as well. Is that I know you're paying money if you are affiliated member, and obviously it goes towards the war chest to fight the next general election, especially. Like we've already agreed earlier, it really is the only game in town, even though it only actually fulfills 60% of your aims out of, you know, what can you do?
Well, I mean, to be clear, when I've spoken about, you know, the Labour membership and I've got an extra £24 a year in my pocket, that is by no means like the reason that I chose to leave. You know, I wasn't looking at my finances and going, oh no, it's looking a bit tight this year. Time to quit the Labour Party. That is basically just an added bonus, in my opinion. It wasn't like down to my reason to leave. It's a very kind offer of you to make, Oliver Foster, to pay for my membership, but there's no way that I could accept that offer, I'm afraid. Not least because if I wanted to be a part of the Labour Party, I'd have no issue with paying the membership fee myself. He also said in his question, I think it's important for us to all feel that our voice matters, that our contribution is important, and we are supporting one another to build the future needed. Saying as an individual that your contribution doesn't matter in a mass movement is missing the point. When I said that, it was in relation to, I think, the previous question, which was, if I scroll up, I can find it. It was something along the lines of, no, I think I've lost it. That's annoying. I'll see if I can find it very quickly. Oh, yes, this was it. Because the original question was, if Corbyn is the predominant social left movement, what is to be gained from leaving? And my answer to that was, well, what is to be gained is purely from a personal perspective. I don't think that there's going to be a massive net gain or net loss as far as the Labour movement goes just from me being outside of it. I wasn't trying to say that, you know, obviously the Labour movement is the sum of its parts. Every member has some degree of influence, you know, of course, but I was just trying to say that I didn't view myself as being particularly pivotal. You know, I'm not like one of these young Labour members who's getting elected for things, and I'm not awfully integral to the
well, again, we come down to your position in the political space, and the fact that you're an activist and you didn't feel you were being honest with people when you were supporting the Labour Party, or openly supporting the Labour Party, when you didn't support the Labour Party view on certain issues, or give him money. So again, it comes to one of my original questions in the first half an hour. God, that's going back like 2.5 hours. Did you feel like a hypocrite? So you didn't want to feel hypocritical, you know? So, you know, I do understand that, and it's looking at your place as a YouTube activist, and you just want to carry on your activism. Sorry to put words in your mouth. I feel that you're looking to carry on your activism outside of the Labour Party rather than being an affiliated member.
Can I just say briefly, I think each time you said it, you said Activision rather than activism. And Activision is, of course, the video games development company, yes, or publisher, or publisher, or whatever.
It's the way I've spelt it, because I'm a big gamer.
My Activision.
Yeah, why not?
What policies will I be developing for release on new consoles next year?
Well, to be fair, it's a digital media, so you know, why is it not Activision? Apart from the trademark.
Yeah. But to go back to your question then.
It's not really a question; it was a comment.
Oh, a comment. Yeah. I mean, I wouldn't to say hypocritical, because I did agree with that earlier on. I did think that was a fairly apt term, but I'd probably say that the most relevant way of putting it would be to say an inconsistency.
Yes.
Simply that I felt that my overt support of the Labour Party was inconsistent with some of my own personal views. That's probably the best way to put it. So I can be not in the Labour Party and still say, oh, next election rolls round, let's have a look what everyone's got on offer. Yeah, out of the lot of them, the Labour Party's giving me most of what I want, I'll vote for them. That would be consistent, at least, because I'd be weighing things up and going, yeah, you know, I don't like everything, but I'll throw my lot in with them for this election because I think they're the best choice for the country. But I feel that to be overtly and actively a member, giving money to and associating myself with that party when there are many things they're doing I don't agree with, that feels somewhat inconsistent to me. So, but as far as the activism thing goes, and of course, I've kind of already conceded to you that, yes, of course, you know, having a YouTube platform, that to a degree, I guess, yes, it could be activism or propaganda or whatever else we want to call it. As far as that goes, I just say, well, with my platform, I will continue to advocate the things I think are right and speak out against the things that I think are wrong. When I left Labour, I made it explicitly clear to people in that video that I was not doing so and attempting to tell others that they ought to do so as well. You know, I'm very much of the mindset, not just with the Labour Party, like whether someone should or shouldn't be a member, but with any political party for that matter. It's like, well, the choices are up to you. It's how does that party match up with your view of the world? I'm not saying your view of the world needs to be the same as my view of the world. You know, in an ideal world, we all like to think we can try and win others over to our side of the argument. That's why it's worth engaging in politics. But I was not at any point trying to say to people, you know, follow my lead. I have done this and therefore you should as well. No, it was just simply being honest with my choice.
Yeah, I think that anybody that took that view when watching your video would be very disingenuous or very disingenuous with themselves. I think, though, again, going back to activism in future, I think as a final point is I think you're really reinforcing your place as Captain Switzerland, because one of the first questions I asked you when I had your Q&A on my channel, which is going back months now, it's back in March, I think it was.
Oh, indeed, yeah.
Yeah. Well, how did you get your name? Why is it Captain Switzerland?
For my diplomacy and neutrality.
Indeed. So maybe you're just going back to your roots.
Perhaps it does, broadly speaking, feel a better fit for Captain Switzerland, the political commentator, not to be aligned with a particular political party. It does somewhat seem more appropriate.
Indeed. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to stop the questions. I'm going to read out some comments, and then we're going to knock it on the head. We've got 5 minutes because my OCD is going to kick in if it's not on the hour or half hour. Honestly, it does my nutting. So Oliver Foster, following up, says, this is exactly the issue. Individual priorities and choices are championed above common good. This is a Tory hollow. Alas, I don't understand that. Hook, line, and sinker. Hollow ales?
Can I try it? This is exactly the issue. Individual priorities and choices championed above the common good. It's the Tory hollow ales pitch hook line and say. I think basically what he's saying is I'm assuming, speaking about my choice to leave Labour, that it was an individual choice for me as opposed to for the common good of the Labour Party.
Yeah,
that's a very Tory thing to do. I think Oliver Foster was accusing me of that. Well, if that's the way that you see it, then there's probably not an awful lot I can do to convince you. But as I've said, for myself at least, it just feels more consistent with what my viewpoint is. That's the beginning of end of it, I'm afraid.
Bionic Burke says you're an unstable centrist. Hang on. Let me answer this as an external commentator who's just spent the last 3 hours questioning him on his politics. I would disagree with that, because if he was, you'd just go out and join the SDP, which we've spoke about, also the Lib Dems, so we know this is not true. So Bionic Burke, I think that's a bit short-sighted.
Do you know, have you seen those memes that people have of, like, there'll be different characters from a TV show or a book, and they'll rank them in this grid of 9 squares, and it will be a lawful evil, chaotic evil, or something like that, lawful good, chaotic good, neutral, and lawful neutral, chaotic neutral.
No, I haven't seen that meme.
Hello?
Yeah, you did go a bit.
Right.
It's okay. I got it.
Oh, did I go robotic?
A little bit, but it's fine. No, I haven't seen that meme.
Can I bring it up for you very briefly, just so it will illustrate?
Of course.
Chaotic. Right. Okay, right. This will do the trick. It's an Avengers meme. Sure, that'll do the trick.
Yeah, sure.
Right, I'll have to zoom in a tiny bit on it. So this is like the meme that exists out there, and I think it's got its roots in like some form of like literary critique or something. It's the way they evaluate the different characters, but it's a meme in itself that you kind of take any set of characters from a TV show, film, book, World War II, whatever the hell you want, and you kind of rank them on this lawful good, neutral good, chaotic good, lawful neutral, true neutral, chaotic neutral, lawful evil, neutral evil, chaotic evil, etc. So it made me think of it when Bionic Bert mentioned that Swiss is just a chaotic centrist. I'd probably say if you spread it out a little bit and you've got left, centre, centre right, and right, I'd probably put myself as chaotic centre left.
Chaotic centre left.
Chaotic centre left, yeah. Quite kind of. I've got a rough bit of the spectrum that I kind of would stake myself to, but my views on various things are kind of all over the place in some ways as well.
Fair enough.
But what would you call yourself, by the way? Would you say that you're a lawful, neutral, or chaotic? I assume it would be left or far left then.
Well, like I'm obviously anarchic socialist, so whatever that is. Lawful evil? No. I'm just kind of transplanting the political spectrum on it. I don't know. I like to think I'm good, though. I like to think I'm a good person. So I'm definitely no Captain America, though. No lawful neutral. No chaotic neutral. Chaotic good, I suppose. Yeah. But yeah, I'm no Tony Stark either, or Iron Man. Chaotic, no Loki. No. No. Sorry, I don't fit. No, it doesn't fit with me. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's a tricky one to ask you. It's like your first time being exposed to the old chaotic good, etc. Anyway, but I just thought I'd share that because it was quite. Oh, Scott Bow says it's a Dungeons and Dragons alignment thing. That's where it's from.
Yeah. Okay, so that's it. 2:30. Thank you very much, guys. It's been like 3.5 hours. Thank you, everybody, to join in, contributing your questions. Thank you to Swiss for me probing you. And we spoke a lot more in depth in more subjects than I thought we would. But it's been a pleasure and an honor as always. And like I said, the original point of this video wasn't to sell you back to the Labour Party. It's just really to strike in depth. Supposedly, it was to find out why you left the Labour Party, but also, hang on, let me just change this. Okay, that's stop. Okay, cool. Not to sell you back to the Labour Party, but to really find out why you left the party, and it ended up as to finding out what your politics actually are. And we've spoken about how your channel's going and where it's going to go in the future. Also, how we think, because we negotiated it together, I suppose. Politics will go in the future, and especially within Brexit. I mean, we spent about 90 minutes, nearly 2 hours on Brexit. So I'd like to thank you because it really did go on a lot longer than I thought it would. So yeah, do you have any final closing thoughts, Swiss?
Yeah. Well, first of all, you know, considering that this was billed as a probing of Captain Switzerland, I've got to say, whatever I anticipated in terms of getting probed, it was most certainly a lot more relaxed and enjoyable than I might have imagined from a would-be probing. Secondly, I hope at the very least through this conversation that even if people don't agree with why I've left the Labour Party, at least they better understand it. You know, I don't expect everyone to agree, and people are perfectly entitled to their own opinions on these things anyway, including whether or not they themselves want to be members of Labour, another party, or whatever. But I hope at the very least, if there was any degree of uncertainty or doubt in people's minds as to why exactly I'd done this or what my motivations were, then at the very least that has been cleared up to some degree. So thank you, as always, for having me on, Chamchi.
No, it's been my pleasure, mate. It's been my pleasure. I mean, we've explored. I thought it was interesting to explore you before. Well, you're essentially your entire political history. If you haven't heard it, like rewatch this video. The first half an hour is gold, mate. Yeah, and obviously, given you a label that you never thought you would actually earn. I being an activist, a left-wing activist, and yeah, I do understand your stance. So thank you very much, everybody in the sign chat. Thank you for everybody that gave us questions. So thank you especially to Oliver Foster, well shafted. Thank you to Angels, obviously, Jack James, Cameron, all the usual, even Matt Hancock.
I was gonna. That's the risk you run of listing everyone's names off. There's going to be someone you end up missing.
Yeah, Thomas Williams. Well, there was only a maximum of 12, but thank you for being here for the entirety, and we will catch you later. And of course, Swiss, if you could just hang around for 2 minutes after. Cheers, mate.
Of course.
Say goodbye.
Goodbye. Catch you later, guys.
By the way, the Twits and the link to the original video from the July 14th is in the description. Thank you very much, guys. Goodbye.